is tricking us a little bit there.
So
let's move along to Keir Starmer, shall we? Because it's 3 years of Keir Starmer as Labour leader. Front page of the Times today, almost half of voters say he still lacks vision. Must be said that that's up from polling in September 2021, but still suggesting he's not very inspiring.
It's not very inspiring, doesn't have any original ideas and doesn't really have a sense of direction. I think, who could blame those voters? Every time, Keir Starmer makes an announcement, it's usually either he's saying that he's going to continue sitting on the fence, or he's reversing a previous position or flip-flopping on something. He has flip-flopped on everything from Brexit to trans rights to pretty much his entire programme that he sold himself as Labour leader. When he spoke to Labour members, he pretty much said he was going to back the entire Corbyn programme. It was about change of leadership, not about change of policy. Now, that's all been scrapped. He spent the past 3 years trying to distance himself from Corbyn. And in fact, that's the only thing we know that he isn't. We know that he is not Jeremy Corbyn, but what actually does he stand for is unclear. It's
interesting. There's a YouGov poll out today, and the highest score that Starmer gets as a leader at 34%, he's average. And 28% say he's terrible, 22% say he's great. But it is his birthday. Let's be a little bit charitable. Is this lack of a hard line on the things you mentioned, like Brexit, trans issues, is that actually turning into something of a strength? And the reason I say that is because he's appearing to be, well, he's not alienating votes like Corbyn did. And this kind of Mr. Magnolia, is that actually clever? He's not a threat and he's not putting people off.
It might work in a general election. It might work to be able to use this terrible new Labour phrase, triangulate. To speak to different groups at different times, to speak with two sides of your mouth. But when you are then in government, you have to make decisions. And if you don't have any views, if you don't have any ideology, then you can quite easily be buffeted by events and by the forces of change. So I think a politician without ideology is actually a dangerous thing, whether you disagree with that view or not. You need someone who has a coherent set of principles. And Keir Starmer, famously is the kind of politician who says, well, if you don't like these principles,
police forces
here are some others.
outside of London.
I mean, the polling for Keir Starmer personally isn't always great, but Labour has been ahead in the polls for a long time now, and I think it has come a long way as a party in 3 very short years, as you say, almost unrecognisable, really, to Corbyn's party.
I think, another one of Keir Starmer's adages, which I think he is, proving to be true, is that oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. And, we really shouldn't underestimate the complete implosion of the support in the Tories, following on from the scandals that brought down Boris, then to the kind of mini Liz Truss disaster, and now Rishi Sunak just, clawing his way back slowly. There was a piece in the Times at the weekend suggesting that Sunak would be happy to be on 30% around this kind of time, which is, pretty low expectations.
Yeah, I think that it's all to fight for. I think you're right, Fraser. I think it feels like Starmer's to lose. And if he keeps sitting on the fence, maybe he might just do that.
And even just in electoral terms, they have a lot of seats they need to win back. That's not easy, even if they, do pick up a good swing.
How would he win an election, Fraser? What does he need to do in the next year or so?
I think he needs to just be consistent about certain things. I think he needs to set out a clear vision.
Policies would help?
Policies would help. I mean, because everything is always a little bit vague. I think he sometimes tries to sound radical on certain issues. If you think about the only thing he sounds radical about is green energy, which I don't think most people are that bothered about, and is probably not a good idea in the long run. He's aping the Tories on pretty much everything else. He's just released his own antisocial behaviour policy a week after Rishi Sunak released his antisocial behaviour policy.
A week after the Tories asked for more pleas.
And he's agreeing to a lot of the Tory crackdown on immigration and things like that. I think he needs to find something distinctive. I think he's going to struggle because he's not someone who original ideas come to quite easily.
But then how much of a problem is the old political left? I mean, there's all talk about Corbyn. Will he stand as an independent in Islington? Will he be allowed back through the cat flap to be a Labour Party? Is the old Labour left dead? Can Starmer go through the middle, or could they come back to bite him on the bum?
I think they're pretty much powerless as a force in British politics. I mean, they might, people might be sympathetic to their views on social media or whatever, but in terms of Labour is Starmer's party now. There's absolutely no question. I mean, he has completely rooted them out of the key kind of structures of the party. So it's his way or the highway. He's the one deciding who's going to be your local MP, not those people, not people in the left, not even people in sort of local membership associations. I just don't think. I think he has quite ruthlessly cut them out. And also, let's not forget, these people don't even have a particular media platform. There's not anywhere else where they can make their arguments, so they are in the wilderness.
He's also... Myers, thank you very much.
Loads to talk about. See you again in the round. Cheers, mate.
Now, the government has announced that going forward it will use ethnicity data to help identify grooming gangs in an attempt to crack down on those who target children. And in a GBNews exclusive, our investigative reporter Charlie Peters spoke to the Home Secretary Suella Braverman following the announcement yesterday.
Over a decade after the grooming gang scandal shocked the nation, plans to tackle the crisis are finally being delivered.
The fact that grooming gangs are preying on young people is a huge failing, both morally and practically. Now,
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Home Secretary Suella Braverman have released a new raft of policies, including funding for a new NCA-supported police task force, the mandatory reporting of child abuse, and a renewed focus on the collection of the ethnicity data of abusers.
Specialist police officers are going to be able to be sent into communities using the expert techniques to help us cramp down on these crimes. They're also going to have a specialist team of data analysts working with them, because we know that better use of data can help uncover hidden exploitation.
The announcement comes after a GBNews Investigates documentary found that the grooming gangs were still operating throughout Britain. Many of the policies recommended in the film are now set to become law. In Rochdale, the Home Secretary spoke with survivors before attending a meeting with police officers and child abuse specialists.
It's clear that this has been a scandal that has gone on for far too long. Vulnerable girls in troubling circumstances have been dismissed, have been ignored when they have justifiably complained about sexual abuse, exploitation, being drugged or being raped. And there has been a failure on the part of state agencies, social workers, teachers, the police, to take seriously those concerns. It's on the back of this challenge and real problem, which is ingrained in some of our institutions, that the Prime Minister and I have now announced a series of package which take us forward, which will ensure that there's now a mandatory duty on child safeguarding professionals to report when they have concerns.
The Home Secretary told GBNews that she hoped her new reforms would bring accountability and more justice to the system of dealing with grooming gangs. But we also spoke to some survivors and campaigners who had a more cautious optimism about the proposals.
I think that it was a good step in the right direction. We needed somebody from the top to acknowledge the failures, what have been happening.
It is a promising sign, but it's whether or not they commit and actually do this, and whether or not what their new plans are actually take effect and make a difference to the people.
I've said frequently that I think the NCA are the best people to do the job. They're victim focused, they know how to treat victims, they understand the problem and the processes, and very, very good at signposting for help and stuff like that.
I'm cautiously optimistic, but words are very easy. Rhetoric costs nothing. I want to see action following the rhetoric. I have heard promises like this many times over the past 10 years. I have to say that was a welcome opportunity to have a frank conversation with them. I brought 3 victims who were able to very clearly state where the failures in the system have been. So all I can say is that we made it very clear that the words themselves will not bring about the changes. We need extra resources, we need extra commitment, we need accountability when there's failures. Where is this task force going to come from, for instance? Because police officers are walking away from police forces in their droves.
Thank you very much. All the best. Bold plans and big promises. Thousands of survivors and campaigners will now wait to see if the government can follow their words with actions. Charlie Peters, GB News, Rochdale.
I just want to say how proud I am of Charlie Peters for what he's doing. His documentary, Grooming Gangs, Britain's Shame, you can still catch that on the GB News YouTube channel. One of the survivors he spoke to in that piece there, Elizabeth, I've spoken to several times myself. And the way her life was traumatised by what happened to her is astonishing. And the recommendations Charlie made in his documentary, getting him access to the Home Secretary, the government looks like it's going to lay out a plan very similar to what this channel suggested. I'm so proud of what GB News is doing in this territory, forcing the conversations that the broadcasters are afraid to have. And as Suella Braverman said yesterday herself, the truth isn't racist.
Well, let us know what you think of that and the recommendations that Charlie made in that report. GBViews at gbnews.uk. So it's specialist officers, isn't it, to train local officers?
Yeah, national people sent in to help with expertise.
Longer sentencing as well. Yeah, and that's exactly what Charlie had suggested. So good work from Charlie there. Right, the time has just gone 20 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
And the man who murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool has been sentenced to life in prison and will serve a minimum of 42 years. Thomas Cashman shot the 9-year-old as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August last year. Outside court, the schoolgirl's mother, Cheryl Corbell, said her family had already started their life sentence, having to spend the rest of their lives without their beloved daughter, Olivia.
A teenager fatally stabbed in Leeds has been named by police as Jamie Mear. The 18-year-old died in hospital after being attacked in the Armley district of the city on Friday. West Yorkshire Police arrested a 30-year-old man on suspicion of murder. He has now been released on bail.
British stamps will feature the King's image for the first time as of today. They feature Charles's head and neck facing left, as all monarchs have done since Queen Victoria.
And we actually have a copy of these news stamps that have been couriered into the studio, so I'll show these to you. This is the news stamp, a bit lower. There we go, bring Todd to hold it lower.
Yeah.
There you go. This is the news stamp. So he's facing to the left, as they have done for a very long time now, but no crown.
Yeah, I think that's a bit odd. And he's got no collar either. He looks almost topless.
Does he?
Well, you know what I mean. That
it
came
doesn't
out
look
wrong.
like he's wearing a shirt. Yep. Very, very interesting. We think he looks quite smart casual, don't we, without his crown. I wonder why he decided not to have the crown. Because Her Majesty did, didn't she, Queen Elizabeth?
Probably a less formal, more approachable, more modern royal family, but I like a bit of tradition myself.
Yeah, see, I would have... see, if I was royal, I'd be wearing a crown all the time. I would never take it off my head. But no, it's his approach, isn't it? Because he likes the walkabout, he likes to be seen out and about with the public. He does seem to have that more casual approach.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's what we're seeing here in the stamp. Maybe that's why the way he wants to be depicted.
Let us know what you think at home, with or without the crown. I'm definitely with the crown.
Yeah, me too. Let us know what you think. Will you be heading down to the post office to buy these? How much is the stamp these days? They're quite expensive.
They're really expensive. They're over £1 for a first class now. £1.19 really? Or something, unless I'm right.
Oh, wow.
Wrong?
Yeah, no.
But they're pricey. That's why everyone sends emails.
Or you can get the e-cards now, can't you? You don't even need a postal stamp. Let us know what you make of those. What do you think? No crown, or should he be wearing a crown? GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Please stay with us as divorce applications skyrocket to their highest level in over a decade. We'll find out what's behind the rise next.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time has just gone 6:25. Still lots to come on today's programme.
And what does an assassination on the streets of St. Petersburg mean for the war in Ukraine? At 7:15, we'll find out more about the death of Vladimir Tatarsky from the Daily Telegraph's defence editor, Con Coughlin.
The World Health Organization has warned that video games could be addictive in the same way as drugs or gambling. So should they come with a health warning? We'll debate that at 7:25.
Also, I'm really looking forward to that debate because my son plays games till the cows come home, but I don't think they're all that bad. So let's get in touch about that one. Let us know what you think about video games or anything else on today's show. The usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.uk via email or tweet us at gbnews.
Now, marriages can end for a range of reasons, whether it's money issues, affairs, or simply not seeing eye to eye with your spouse.
So with financial pressures boarding over for many families, it's no surprise divorce rates have hit a decade high.
And with almost all applications now being made online, filing for divorce is less troublesome than ever. Well, for more, let's speak now to the partner at McAllister Family Law. That's Amanda McAllister. Good morning to you, Amanda. Thank you so much for your company. So, divorce rates have hit a 10-year high. What's to blame for that?
There are a variety of factors, really. I think the most recent increase is due to the change in how you get a divorce. Obviously, previously, you had to cite blame on your partner. Now, with a no-fault divorce, you just simply apply online. So, in my view, it has become very easy and quick to apply for a divorce. And people can do that without a solicitor.
So do you think this kind of lack of barrier, this lack of kind of cooling off time, if you like, is fueling this boom? Or is it a good thing? I mean, should we have more freedom of choice these days? We're becoming more like America. We can order a pizza online. Why not divorce?
I think there's certainly a lot to be said with that. When I look at divorce 20 years ago, 25 years ago, people's financial circumstances were very different. And whilst, yes, we are facing a cost of living crisis, women can live independently now from men, and people can move on without having to be stuck in a marriage that they don't want to be in.
How much do you think the cost of living has impacted on divorce rates? Because financial pressure does put a lot of pressure on a marriage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the difficulty is when people are unhappy, it is very difficult for them to leave the marital home now, because with the increase in mortgage rates, it's difficult for people to obtain another property. So we do find a lot of people are in unhappy marriages still living under the same roof, which does take its toll. And as a result, we have seen a lot of increases in domestic violence and obviously issues in relation to children. So it's quite an unhappy state of affairs, really.
So, Amanda, we talked about cost of living crisis. So if you want to get divorced these days, what's it cost for a quickie, so to speak?
Everybody asks this question. There's no such thing as a quickie divorce. Yes, you can apply for a divorce online. The fees are £593, but that is just for the divorce. The most expensive part is dealing with the financial arrangements, and that is in relation to things like dividing the house, pensions, etc. So again, people often think it's only £593 to get divorced. It's a misconception. Because that is just ending the marriage. It's not sorting out the financial arrangements. And that is what does come at a cost.
Do you think we're seeing here the disintegration of marriage? Do you think we will see fewer and fewer couples actually tying the knot in the future?
No, I don't think so. And I gave this a lot of thought before coming on the programme. And the rates of people separating who are not married have increased massively as well. I just think people have more choice these days if they want to move on. People don't have to be in an unhappy relationship, which has its positives and its negatives, depending on which way you look at it.
I think it's also worth pointing out, Amanda, like my folks, they've been divorced many years, and they're the best of friends I've ever been. And I wonder sometimes if people have this social guilt about letting the family down, letting tradition down, but actually a happier life for all involved sometimes can be for the best, can't it?
I think so. And I often say when people say, can divorce be amicable? I don't think it can be amicable because there's a lot of feeling and emotion involved, but it can be respectful. And I think if people go into it with a view that it's not pleasant, but I'm going to show respect and come out of this trying to have a decent relationship, it's much better for the children involved and it's much better for people's mental health because it is an extremely stressful time.
Amanda, it's quite startling statistics here. 42% of UK marriages, this is February 2023 statistics, end in divorce. 42% is almost half, isn't it?
It is. And I very often get asked, is it just the younger generation? But if you were to ask me which age group has seen the greatest rise, it's 50 upwards. And I do also think...
And is it true it's mostly women who are applying for divorce, so it's like a Shirley Valentine thing?
It is more recently. I'm certainly seeing a trend. And I do also think there's a celebrity culture at the moment, sort of advocating divorce for over 50s. You've had your kids. Who needs a man? Move on. I do think that's a huge contributor.
OK, Amanda, really good to have you on the programme this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, well, stay with us. We'll be discussing the sentencing of Olivia Pratt-Korbel's killer, Thomas Cashman, as we go through the papers with Stephanie Boyce and Mark Lehane.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back to Breakfast. It's 6:34. Let's bring you up to date with all of today's front pages now.
And the Telegraph pays tribute to former Chancellor Nigel Lawson, Thatcher's tax slasher, who's died at the age of 91.
And the Times reveals almost half of voters believe Keir Starmer, Labour leader, lacks the vision to become the new Prime Minister.
The Mirror call out the bravery of Olivia Pratt-Corbell's mother, Cheryl, and the cowardice of her killer, Thomas Cashman, for refusing to attend court. He was sentenced yesterday to 42 years for the 9-year-old's murder in Manchester.
And the Sun go with Philip Schofield's words that he no longer has a brother after a sibling was found guilty for sexually abusing a teenage boy.
Well, joining us to go through the papers in more detail this morning is immediate past president of the Law Society, Stephanie Boyce, and Mark Lehane, former advisor to Nadeem Zahawi. Good morning to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Stephanie, let's start with you, shall we, and the horrific story of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, absolute tragedy. And it's a tribute, isn't it, to the mother and the tribute that she gave to her daughter yesterday outside court.
Absolutely. A number of the papers lead with this story and it's a tragic case. And can I say my sympathy to Olivia's family and, in fact, all victims who have had their lives disrupted by crime and violence. But we heard of the mother speak outside court, and she talked about the impact of this tragedy on her life and her family's life, but also what a number of the papers have led on is the fact that Mr. Cashman, who was found guilty of 6 counts, including the murder of Olivia, and sentenced to a minimum of 42 years term of imprisonment, a life term, did not come to the dock, if you like.
A huge talking point. How could he do that? That's what people want to know.
So, under current legislation, there is nothing that compels him, as I understand it, there is nothing that compels him currently to come to the dock. I understand that the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, who is also the Justice Secretary, is going to fast-track legislation to ensure that where we have convictions for serious crimes, that the offenders, the convicted defendant, is compelled to come to court to face sentencing.
Because don't you think that the family deserve that moment, that closure, to look him in the eye, to let him know how they feel, and this guy hiding away like a coward sends out the wrong message?
Absolutely. And, of course, what Mr Cashman is saying, and what a number of papers are reporting this morning, that the reason for him not coming to court was because he felt that the whole trial and sentencing had been turned into a circus because supposedly he overheard members singing, "We are the champions." It's almost beggars belief that he feels it's been turned into a circus when he has committed this crime. The impact that his actions have had on this family and others, because it does create a ripple effect. But also, if I may, that the young lady, the very brave young lady, and there are a number of people in this story that are very brave, but the very brave young lady who came forward, who now will spend the rest of her life, possibly, in being protected because of what she did, to come forward and give that crucial testimony that ensured that Mr Cashman was convicted for this heinous crime.
Very, very brave. We were talking yesterday about long sentences, and this is one, some would say not enough, 42 years. It is a life sentence.
Yes.
Is that right, that it should be, a life for taking a life?
Well, I mean, there are a number of factors that the judge, Mrs Justice Yip, would have considered when she imposed the sentence. So, of course, we know in this country that most of us will understand in this country that life means not exactly life, sometimes 15 years. The fact is that the judge was clear that her starting point was 30 years, and she took into consideration a number of factors that took her to 42 years. And that's the minimum, because he's been given concurrent sentences that will... so the minimum term he can serve is 42, and then, of course, it will be reviewed, and if it's considered, he may come out on parole I think he'll be in his 70s. But if he does, he will be on licence, more than likely.
Stephanie Mercer, that was an excellent summary of the events. Thank you very much. Mark, can I bring you in on this one? Because from the public's point of view, It makes a mockery, doesn't it? This guy is not allowed... He just hides in his cell. The family... We heard about the grandmother passed away only recently, died heartbroken. And there's this sense sometimes that the justice system is set up to protect the victim.
Well, just this whole case is just tragic, isn't it? It's so sad. A lovely young girl. I'm a parent myself. If you've got children of your own or you know any children, to have that happen is just heartbreaking. And then when something like that happens, you need justice to happen, but also to be seen to have been done. And I think lots of people looking at this case will think that by this individual not going into the dock, not being there in person to hear the verdict, it will deny not just the family, although that's the most important thing, but the wider public the sense that justice has been done and been seen to be done, that they took it in person. What can be done about it legally? I don't know. We've got a legal expert here who would know more about that. But, I just think all of us looking at the story will be thinking there before the grace of God.
I think it's really heartening, actually, that you said that they're considering reappraising the situation. And if any good can come of this, maybe that's it.
Well, absolutely. I know that also, that as I understand it, that compelling a defendant to come into court is not being ruled out at this stage. But the fact that, absolutely, that the government is considering fast-tracking measures to ensure that convicted criminals are brought to court to hear sentencing. And not only that, but to hear the victims' impact statements being read. They need to be able to... The family, the victims, need to have their day in court to be able to get across the impact that this has had on them and their wider family and community.
Yeah, it's an important part of justice being served, isn't it? And especially, optics. To see somebody being handed down a sentence is very important.
But also Thomas Cashman should be hearing those victim impact statements. He needs to live with the fact he's destroyed a family's life and he's dodged the bullet. Anyway, let's move on. It gets my blood boiling.
OK, Mark, let's look at something totally different now, but it is on the front of a lot of the papers this morning. It is, of course, the death of Nigel Lawson at 91, being described in the Telegraph as Thatcher's tax slasher.
Yeah, Nigel Lawson was an absolute titan. And in fact, he wasn't just one of the most significant Chancellors of the Exchequer we've had in modern times. And in fact, to some extent, we're still living in the political and economic landscape that Nigel Lawson shaped. But before he came into politics, he was a brilliant journalist and editor of The Spectator magazine. And after politics, he continued to be involved in issues and policies that have really made a difference to people, as well as writing, people forget this, a very successful diet book, particularly aimed at blokes. He was quite open about the fact he'd put on a huge amount of weight whilst he was Chancellor, all those fancy lunches and dinners, and then he realised he needed to shift the weight afterwards. But in terms of as a Chancellor, he really did change things, and in so many ways changed things for the better. He had very clear political and economic principles, and it took a long time after he was Chancellor for the changes he made to be changed and unpicked by successive governments. A lot of the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown legacy they could only do because of the economic reforms that Nigel Lawson had pushed through and the successes that led to, and then the golden era of growth that we had from the mid-90s through to the mid-2000s.
And still so influential. As you say, very much still living in the environment that he created. We've got a photo, hopefully we can get it up for you now, of Rishi Sunak when he became Prime Minister, hanging a photo of Nigel Lawson in his office. He is a bit, there it is. Very much seeing him as a model, as someone that they want to emulate.
So I think the thing that made him so significant as a politician was he not only had, if you like, political philosophies and values that he stood by, he was also a massive intellectual. He understood, if you like, the theory, but he was very pragmatic in practice. Like Mrs Thatcher and her pomp, they both knew about what they wanted to do, but they knew you had to pick the right moment to be able to do it. And so that's why he did year after year after year, try and simplify the tax system, bring taxes down to encourage higher growth, and to do it in a way that brought as many people as possible into the tax system so they had a stake in keeping the economy growing and keeping taxes low.
The irony being, of course, we have two political parties now. You can't even tell the difference between their taxation policies, which Stephanie brings us neatly on to the next story you've chosen here, the front page of today's Times. Sir Keir Starmer lacks vision. Do you agree?
Well, I think, obviously this story perhaps will cause Keir some time to reflect. But the fact that half of voters think that the Labour Party lacks vision, that he as leader has not been coherent in setting out that vision. And of course, what he goes on to say is that he set out a 3-stage plan. Stage 1 is change, change, change. Stage 2 is expose the government for what they are. And according to Keir, he's now on stage 3. If not them, why us? And perhaps, as I say, this is where we might see Labour setting out their vision, because voters are not convinced. And that's the difficulty when we know that possibly within the next year that we are going to face a general election. And if he is to get voters on side, then Labour need to be very clear, and I don't think it's enough to continue to say we don't know what we're going to inherit, therefore we're in it for the long game and we're going to wait and see. And, of course, the difficulty that will give Keir even more of a headache is the fact that Rishi Sunak's, according to the papers today, his popularity is soaring from 7% to 43% amongst Conservative voters.
It's interesting because when you look into the detail, the most dissatisfied demographic with Keir Starmer, unusually, are those who voted to remain. 42% say that Starmer lacks a clear vision. What they mean is they'd like Labour to rejoin.
Well, that is a possibility, but I understand that Labour has been out and about, trying to listen to a number of constituents as to what they want, as to what they expect from government. So I would suppose, and of course Mark can tell us a bit more about this, but I would have supposed that Labour would know exactly by now what it is that they should be setting out, and they should know that actually the constituency, the electorate, are not very clear as to what they're offering, and they should be telling us.
Well, I wish they would.
So do you think that's what it is, Mark? Is it a lack of clarity about what exactly Keir Starmer stands for?
I have to say, I think Keir Starmer and his senior team are playing a very clever long-term game. I think they're serious about this. Some would say they're being cynical. I think actually they're just playing very sensible politics. Any big, successful policies, if they announce them now, they would rightly be nabbed by the government, which we saw in childcare actually recently, didn't we? Labour were making a big noise about a big, bold childcare offer for families. The government has stepped in and done it. That said, I think we're not where we were in the mid-90s with Tony Blair. Keir Starmer is not Tony Blair. I think he's doing a really good job. Remember, Labour were both morally and financially pretty much bankrupt when he came in. He's steadied the ship. But it would be helpful to know some details as to what they would do on some of the big picture stuff, because they could be in government in just over a year's time.
But as you say, come a long way in 3 short years if you think of Corbyn's party.
So I was a candidate in the 2019 election. I was taken aback in the Labour strongholds, the number of families that would drag me into their homes to show me their links to the Labour Party in the past and explain to me why they would never vote Labour again. I think Keir Starmer's done a good job to try and appeal to those. It might not be appealing to lots of the rest of us, but I think they've done a good job of neutralising the toxicity that...
I think you're right, and I also stood as a candidate in that same election, and Corbyn was the Tory party's 12th man.
Yeah.
He was the man on the bench. It was the bogey man in the closet. Starmer isn't that. I want to remain on the story if we can, because I find it fascinating how almost Starmer's neutrality, his Mr. Magnolia, is turning out to be an advantage, whereas Corbyn was divisive. You either liked him or you're against him. But is this neutrality actually clever?
Well, for some people, absolutely. And of course, we've heard Mark set out why, it's such a good strategy. And of course, Keir has talked extensively as to, he even likened it to when he was younger, running long distance, and you don't go out in the lead for obvious reasons. You wait and you bide your time, and then when the time is right, you make your move.
The hare and the tortoise.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what, of course, he is, we can only presume he is doing here.
Interesting.
Mark, let's cross over the pond, shall we? It's a big day in New York today. Donald Trump will be appearing in court a little bit later on today.
I have a feeling that when it was announced that Donald Trump was going to be arrested and this was all going to happen, he probably punched the air. Yeah. Here is a guy who thrives on publicity, who was facing his position as the Republican frontrunner for the nomination for the next presidential election. He was losing that role as Ron DeSantis was really making his case. And this has now put him square in the centre of the media in America once again. again. So he must be loving it. What I am a bit worried about is what is this going to do in New York? All police officers in New York, all 35,000 police officers have been told to report for duty until further notice. People are being advised to stay away from the centre of New York. I really hope things stay as calm as possible there. But given what a mercurial, volatile character Donald Trump is, I'm not sure he's going to be necessarily going through this process with dignity and urging people to be calm about it.
So, Stephanie, you're the legal brain on this table today. In terms of the chances of prosecution, they're slim, aren't they? It's not about getting a prosecution, it's about the process. But if the process is benefiting Trump, might it backfire on the Democrats?
Well, certainly there have been a number of Republican politicians who've come out of late who've said exactly that, and exactly what Mark has said, that here is a man who thrives on publicity. And, in fact, I heard this morning before I left home that his popularity has increased. You know, he's now ahead in the polls to become the next president of the United States of America again. I think the difficulty for democracy and all of the legal system that's going on is that we don't know, or certainly I don't know, the allegations yet, what he's going to be...
Still under seal, yes.
Yes.
34 charges, quite a lot.
34 charges. But, again, whether or not they make it across the line, and there is a conviction, coupled with all the other allegations that are in the background, including the riots that took place on January the 6th a couple of years back, whether or not they get a conviction and Mr Trump is convicted is another story for another day, I guess.
I mean, one other thing to look ahead to is his speech, which he'll be making later at Mar-a-Lago. He's getting straight to the airport and heading down to Florida. What sort of thing do you think we'll expect to hear from Mr Trump?
I would anticipate it'd be classic Trump, wouldn't it? He's a victim. This is a political conspiracy to bring him down. He will use it to play to his base. I mean, the only silver lining I can think about this, and it's not remotely the same thing, but it's a bit like when, you know, Rishi got fined for not wearing a seatbelt in the back of a car. It does show that no one is above the law. So I really hope that if these charges are brought, that it does feel like a genuine case of people trying to uphold the law rather than a politically motivated campaign. Because if it turns out to be like that, which is how he will try and spin it, I don't think that's good for anybody other than Donald Trump.
And I think also the difficulty here is that you've got legal officials who are elected. It has politicised the legal system, and that's the difficulty.
Yeah. And there are already deep divides in the US, and it just feeds exactly into that. I mean, as you say, the left would say this is holding people to account, anybody even in power, nobody's above the law. The right, it feeds into their idea, isn't it, that it's a different standard of justice, and Donald Trump is being a victim in all of it. It's going to be a big day. We have to leave it there, I'm afraid, but Stephanie, Mark, we're really good to have you, and you've got you the next hour as well, haven't we?
That was absolutely excellent newspaper review. Thank you very much.
Now the time has just gone 51 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
And tributes have been paid to Conservative MP and former Chancellor Nigel Lawson following his death at the age of 91. The leading Brexiteer served in Margaret Thatcher's government and sat in the House of Lords until his retirement in December. Rishi Sunak has called him a transformational Chancellor and an inspiration.
The government is setting out a new plan to ensure clean and plentiful supply of water for the future. The government wants to see more investment from water companies as well as tougher enforcement for those who pollute. It also could see a ban on plastic in wet wipes and restrictions on substances in textiles, cleaning products and paints.
And e-scooter rental companies Dot and Tia will continue UK operations despite people in Paris voting to ban the vehicles. Around 15,000 e-scooters will be removed from central Paris at the end of August. In the UK, the Department for Transport say safety will always be their top priority.
Now, remembering lost loved ones never gets any easier, and having to deal with over 90 potholes en route to the cemetery is the last thing you need. But that is the reality for mourners at Yardley Crematorium and Cemetery in Birmingham.
West Midlands reporter Jack Carson went to meet the man behind the campaign to repair this road.
Potholes are a regular eyesore on roads across the UK. But these small craters don't sit on a main road, they cover this cemetery. This is Yardley Crematorium and Cemetery, where a stretch of the access road used by hearses and visitors has been almost destroyed with 90 potholes. Community campaigner John Gilmore first reported the problems of Birmingham City Council after visiting his nan's grave at Christmas. He has fond memories of the woman he called his second mum and feels the state of the road is disrespectful to those who lay to rest.
It's heartbreaking, really, to see it like this when families and relatives come to pay their respects to their loved ones, and this can be the closest place where they feel close to their relatives. And the last thing you want to have on your mind is, I've just gone over a pothole, has that damaged my tyre? And these places should be beautiful, lovely, not looking like derelict pieces of land.
Initial responses from the bereavement services back in January acknowledged the condition of the site and the temporary repairs that had been carried out. They also pointed John to badger activity for being a reason for a lot of the damage to the graveyard. As we were filming, a local resident narrowly avoided one of the potholes on his bike.
It's not very good at all. It certainly has got more potholes than I thought it had, and it needs something to be done with it. You don't realise just how bad it is until you actually come up here, especially on something like a bicycle.
With months having passed since the initial contact was made, John Gilmore worries the state of the cemetery is part of a wider problem.
Clearly there's an issue with funding here, because investment isn't going in to cemeteries as it should be. And I've spoke recently with a well-known funeral directors in Birmingham, and they are noticing it themselves. And it's real issues now with the service standards not what they used to be.
Birmingham City Council now confirmed that work to repair the road and upgrades to the crematorium will commence in the coming weeks. A spokesperson said, essential work to replace and upgrade cremators at Yardley Crematorium is due to begin next month, so the site will be closed from the 27th of April for this work to be carried out. In addition, extensive road resurfacing will be carried out within the grounds of Yardley Crematorium to ensure we provide a safe and pleasant environment for all users of the cemetery. For John, remembering and celebrating his nan's life will continue, and until the eyesores of this cemetery road have been properly repaired, so too will his campaign. Jack Carson, GB News, Yardley.
Well, thank you so much to Jack Carson for that report. And that story, the cemetery pothole story, was actually written into Jack from a viewer, GB News viewer. So if there's anything going on in your local area that you think needs to have a light shone on it, anything that we can help with, do get in touch and let us know. And we hopefully will do more of those sorts of reports. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But stay with us, still lots more to come. We're going to have lots on Donald Trump as he arrives in New York ahead of his arrest later today.
But first, Stephen Keats has your Tuesday weather forecast.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. It's a cold old start out there for many places this morning, isn't it? Touch of frost in a good number of places. Plenty of sunshine though, but always cloudy and a little bit more damp towards the far northwest, and that's because we've got this weather system edging in from the Atlantic, coming up against this blocking area of high pressure, so it's not going to make much further southeastwards progress. For many places it's going to be a dry day. So lots of sunshine out there this morning. Yes, it is quite cold, but those temperatures will rise quite quickly underneath the strong April sunshine. The sunshine across eastern Scotland, southern Scotland, parts of West Wales and Western England will turn a bit hazier as we move on through this afternoon as high cloud spills across. But the cloudy skies will always be across parts of Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, although rainfall amounts here generally fairly minimal, not amounting to much. And after that chilly start, temperatures recovering quite widely into the low teens, and with light winds in the south, it should feel quite warm, although an onshore breeze around some southern and eastern coastal counties will take the edge off the temperatures. Through Tuesday evening then, the rain in the northwest will get its act together, become a bit heavier, a bit more persistent for parts of Northern Ireland, Western and Northern Scotland. And ahead of this, a veil of cloud will extend its way further south and east across much of the rest of the UK, so it won't be as cold to take us into Wednesday morning as it has been for a couple of mornings this week, although still the odd pocket of frost possible across the far southeast where the greater chance of seeing a few clear skies exist. But Wednesday will be a different looking day for the majority of us, certainly for England and Wales, with more cloud in the skies. This area of rain slowly shuffling its way into parts of northern England and West Wales. The wettest conditions again across parts of Northern Ireland initially, parts of Scotland, but brightening up in the far northwest with a few showers. And temperatures not dissimilar to what we saw earlier in the week, but we'll have lost the sunshine, so probably a cooler feel for most of us. So it's a bit more unsettled for a time midweek with some rain or showers around. Hopefully by Friday turning a little bit drier and brighter for most, and temperatures fell on the most part in the low teens, peaking around 15 or 16.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Donald Trump is in New York as he prepares to become the first former president to face criminal charges.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 4th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
As just said, Donald Trump has arrived in New York ahead of a historic court appearance today. Reports suggest he will face 34 felony charges and plead not guilty.
Tributes are pouring in for the former Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who's died at the age of 91. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hailed him as a transformational Chancellor and an inspiration.
A poll marking Keir Starmer's third anniversary as Labour leader today has revealed that almost half of voters believe he has not set out a clear vision for the party or the country.
The man who murdered 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel has been jailed for life. Thomas Cashman refused to appear in the dock as he was sentenced to a minimum of 42 years in prison.
And the first stamps featuring the profile of King Charles go on sale today. In line with tradition, the monarch faces to the left, but unlike the Queen, he is not wearing a crown in the image.
Now, it's going to be a significant day in New York today because Donald Trump is set to be arrested, reportedly facing 34 felony charges. Lots of you getting in touch about that. John says the left-wing Democrats are scared of Trump and want to keep him sealed away in his box.
And John is echoing the point we've been talking about this morning. This is going to give Donald Trump more support from the American people. It could bring him back as president in 2024, and all the world leaders and foreign ministers are going to have an absolute nightmare because all they've done is slag him off over the last 3 years.
And Shax has been in touch saying the witch hunt on Trump is embarrassing America and showing what an ugly country it really is. The way America has ignored the criminal odours coming from Hunter Biden's laptop and Biden himself is incredulous.
And a nice little shout out, Ed, enjoying the breakfast show from Virginia, USA. Thank you for joining us, Ed.
Yes, thank you. Must be early.
Yeah,
early morning. But thank you for all of those. Do keep them coming. Let us know what you think. It's going to be a significant day today. GBnews at gbnews.uk, because this is our top story. Former US President Donald Trump has arrived in New York. He arrived last night as he prepares to become the first former US president to be arrested.
Mr. Trump is due to surrender at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office later today before appearing in front of a judge for an arraignment where he will plead not guilty.
Well, our political editor Darren McCaffrey is in New York and has the latest.
Well, Donald Trump has been hunkered down in Trump Towers all of last night here in Manhattan with his family, with his legal advisors, ahead of what is to be an historic day here in the United States. The first time a former or current president has ever appeared in a court charged effectively with a crime. Now, later on, President Trump is going to travel a relatively short distance from Trump Tower down to Lower Manhattan, where he will first of all meet with the district attorney of Manhattan, where he will be fingerprinted. We think, though it is unlikely that he is going to be handcuffed or indeed have his mugshot taken. He will then appear in court itself, where he'll be in front of a judge and have the charge sheet read out against him. Now, we think he's going to face at least one charge of business frauds, though some media reports in the United States say the charge sheet could be up to 30 separate charges. We're going to have to wait for that. It will only be revealed in court later on. President Trump is going to deny all of those charges, though. His lawyer has repeatedly made that clear, that he is up for the battle of trying to exonerate himself throughout this process. Now, we're not entirely sure whether this legal proceeding, the bit in court, which is going to be relatively short, we think around 50 minutes long, is going to be televised or not. There have been meetings today between essentially the judge and legal officials and the broadcasters here in the United States who do want it televised, though Donald Trump's team have made it clear they do not. They feel that it would add to a circus-like atmosphere. And then after that short appearance, President Trump is going to head straight to the airport, back on his plane and back to Florida, where later on tonight he's going to address his supporters down at Mar-a-Lago. And again, I'm sure he's going to reiterate the message we've heard time and time again, that he feels that this is a bit of a witch hunt, that he's been prosecuted, and that in the end this is part of a political process to deny him the ability to run in the 2024 presidential election. The other thing to look out for today is protests. We are expecting some Trump supporters to gather effectively here in New York again a little later on. We don't know how many. So far, yes, there's been a few protesters, either down in Florida or indeed here in New York, but not any great numbers, though that may well change later on today. And there's been a warning from the mayor of New York to those protesters to be on their best behaviour. So it is going to be a fascinating day, a day in which history will be made, and a day which also could make history in another way, in that it could set the template, the tone, and indeed change the course of not just President Trump's attempt to become the nominee for the next presidential election, but indeed his attempts to become that president in 2024.
That's Darren McCaffrey with that report in New York, and he will be there throughout today bringing us the latest. But for now, joining us more on this is the political commentator Steve Gill and Professor of International Politics at the University College Dublin, Scott Lucas. Good morning to you, Steve and Scott. Thank you very much for your company. Steve, let's start with you, shall we? What do you make of all of this? Because this is significant, isn't it? The first US president ever in history to face criminal charges.
Yeah, I think you used the word significant. I would also say it will be a spectacle, and that's part of what President Trump wants. There are reports that he was given the opportunity to do this arraignment via Zoom. He's preferring to go in daylight, even though they've apparently negotiated no handcuffs, perhaps no mugshot, although the president has made comments that his mugshot will become the most famous mugshot in history and that you'll see it on T-shirts and mugs and everything else. The president is going to draw attention to this. And the other sideshow is that you have a partisan Democrat judge who will be overseeing this, who is reportedly considering imposing a gag order on the president to keep him from talking about this case, which would be questionable from a constitutional standpoint, particularly when you have an announced presidential candidate who would then be gagged by a court order by a judge who is a partisan Democrat.
Well, Steve, they're going to try and gag Trump. They're probably going to need a bigger gag. I just want to put something across to you, Steve, from our viewers this morning. A couple of points here. Our viewers are calling this trial a witch hunt, and they're saying it will increase support for Trump from the American public. What's your take on that, Steve?
Well, you're already seeing that in the polls as his numbers have moved up. He's raised about $7 or $8 million in just the days since the indictment was announced. So, yes, he is going to see a surge. The question is whether or not that will carry into a general election. It will certainly, I think, help him in a primary, in a Republican primary. His base is coming to his support. Even those who were opposing him in the Republican primary are now leaking towards him, but not sure whether that will actually carry into a general election. More importantly, this thing opens up Pandora's box of tit-for-tat political prosecutions. For example, Joe Biden's brother has been accused of fraud with a healthcare company that has clinics in Tennessee and Florida. You could see a county prosecutor in Florida or Tennessee deciding they want to get some national attention by indicting the president's brother and trying to tag that on to the president himself. So this is opening a Pandora's box that I think Democrats will rue the day they ever let this partisan Democrat pursue these very weak misdemeanor charges against the former president.
Scott, I want to take that over to you then. Are we opening Pandora's box here? Because we've had a viewer email in this morning saying that America has ignored the criminal odours coming from Hunter Biden's laptop and Biden himself with his tax records. Is there a point to be made there?
No, I mean, the fundamental point is that, and I hope Steve will finally come out and say this, is that the legal process must be upheld and respected, whether Trump is acquitted or convicted. What you have seen are those who want to abide by the legal system, and then you've seen the gaslighting on the other side by Trump, his allies, and regrettably by Steve. What I mean by gaslighting is that instead they'll portray Trump as the victim, and what they'll do is that they will bully, they will insult, they will attack the district attorney, Alvin Bragg. They will attack the grand jury that brought the indictment. They'll attack the prosecutors. And indeed, they will attack, just as Steve has, without any evidence, the judge. Now, it is a principle of the American system that you let the system work without political interference. You don't put your thumbs on the scale. I'm sure Steve is right. There will be a spectacle, and Donald Trump will try to put his thumb on the scale. But we at least should have the decency to let the system work without throwing away terms like political persecution and witch hunt. And by the way, just to refute what Steve said, Joe Biden's brother has been investigated by that legal system, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been investigated by that legal system since 2018. So it is a balanced system in the sense that all should be held accountable, and none should escape accountability by attacking the people who try to maintain law and order.
Steve, what do you make of that? Do you think we should just let the people who are maintaining law and order get on with their jobs?
Yeah, let's deal with a few of the facts. First of all, these misdemeanor charges in New York have a 2-year statute.
They're not misdemeanors. Felony charges, Steve. Felony. Thank you. Felony charges. Yeah, felony charges. Just to set the facts straight, they're felony charges, Steve.
Please, guys. Let Steve go first, because, Scott, you've had quite a run. Steve.
Charges. And as he was saying, we've had other investigations on the federal charges related to federal election law violations. The FBI decided there wasn't anything to pursue. The Department of Justice decided there wasn't anything to pursue. The Federal Election Commission decided there was nothing to pursue. So yes, it was investigated at the federal level. They rejected it. And now you have a partisan elected Democrat in Manhattan pursuing charges on misallocation of records and trying to shoehorn them into a federal charge. He lacks jurisdiction. And yes, it is beyond the statute of limitations.
Scott?
Show some decency, Steve, and show some respect for the legal facts. Here are the facts as they set out. We will not know the exact nature. We will not know exact nature of the charges until this afternoon. But when they are unsealed by the judge in the court, the reliable organizations say we are talking about at least 24 and possibly more than 30 charges, and they are not misdemeanor charges. They are felony charges. They are felony charges which are not about campaign election violations. They are felony charges which are likely to be about false recording of business transactions, not only over the Stormy Daniels case, the payoff made in an attempt to influence the U.S. election, but also about other matters concerning the Trump Organization. Remember that the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer were convicted last year on violations. So again, Steve, please try to have respect for this. Don't try to play cheerleader for one side over the other. All should be accountable before the law. And to try to get Donald Trump off is not just a question of what happens while Trump is here, but about what happens to the American system after he is gone.
Steve, final words here.
Point out that the two key witnesses in this case are a porn star who is a affirmed liar. She owes Donald Trump $300,000 for a failed case that she had regarding slander. And the other key witness is Cohen, who is the former attorney for the president, who actually went to jail for fraud and perjury. So the two key witnesses of this partisan political district attorney are proven liars, and that's going to be the basis of his case.
OK, Steve Gill, Scott Lucas, thank you very much for joining us.
Far more than two witnesses.
There we go. Do you know, if the coming day is going to be anything like that, Ellie, we are in for quite a ride. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
I mean, it is certainly divisive, isn't it? And as you say, that's indicative of what we're going to see today.
Yeah.
I mean, there are sharp divides, aren't there, in the American political system and the spectacle. We're using Steve word there. I mean, it's only going to,
I've got to say,
really.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Because I just think politics just needs this drama, it needs this kind of cut and thrust, needs this incision, needs this debate, it needs that engagement. And whatever you say about Donald Trump, that's what he does.
Yeah, I mean, Darren McCaffrey will be in New York for us all of today, bringing us the latest, so do stay with us on GB News for that.
OK, on to our next story now. Nigel Lawson, the Chancellor that spearheaded Margaret Thatcher's privatisation and tax-cutting agenda, has passed away at the age of 91.
Yes, tributes have been pouring in for the Tory grandee, including from the Prime Minister, who described him as an inspiration to me and many others.
And former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he was a fearless and original flame of free market conservatism.
Well, let's speak now to the Deputy Editor of Spite, Fraser Myers. Fraser, a titan, really, in the Conservative Party and British politics.
I think that's a fair tribute. He was certainly a contrarian, certainly someone unafraid to speak his mind. And I think perhaps why the tributes flooding in are so strong, because, today we live in an era of consensus politics where politicians try not to offend each other or offend the public, where every utterance is focus grouped into an inch of its life. Here was someone who was unafraid to speak his views, to take contrarian and sometimes difficult positions.
And isn't it interesting how he's now become a poster boy for the Conservative chancellors of late, yet they don't seem to emulate his policies? I mean, we've now got the highest tax regime since World War II. The Tories are no longer the party of lower taxation. Maybe they should take a leaf out of the book and bring back a bit of the Lawson spirit.
Well, I think Kwasi Kwarteng tried to take a leaf out of Nigel Lawson's book, and we saw how that ended. I mean, the other thing to remember with Nigel Lawson is that he was credited with what's called the Lawson boom. That, after his tax cutting, deregulation, things like that. But booms end in busts, and that ended with the horrific recession of the 1990s, with wild levels of inflation, with interest rates going up to around 14%. Can you imagine that now when we're panicking about them being at 4%? So, all political careers end in failure. The great thing about Lawson, actually, is that after his, sort of main political life, after he exited that stage, he still became an important figure in general. He was, a big advocate of Brexit. Ironic, since he was a supporter of the European exchange rate mechanism. He believed that would tame inflation in the UK. The European exchange rate mechanism, for people who don't remember, was the precursor to the euro. But since then, he became a big voice for Brexit. And also, perhaps most famously, a critic of the climate agenda. He was very sceptical of some of the ways, much of the sort of decarbonisation agenda, of renewable energy, of the amount of essentially austerity that many politicians of the kind of green hue want to put us through. He recognised that this would be impoverishing.
And that's another policy that may well land well today, because net zero, we know, is forcing up the cost of living for many ordinary families at home today. We're feeling the pinch. And maybe that attitude is another thing that we could learn from Nigel Lawson.
Definitely, and just the willingness to speak his mind on this issue when it feels like there's such a strong consensus, when you're told there cannot be a debate. I mean, I think he even said in his memoirs, if he saw consensus, he would want to run after it and try and stir things up. That's a good attitude to have in politics in general. I don't agree with much of what Lawson stands for. I don't agree with much of what Thatcher stood for in that kind of Thatcherite period. But that is to be admired, that willingness to challenge consensus.
Okay.
Fraser Myers, thank you very much for your input this morning.
Thank you
very much. Now it's 18 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The man who murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbett in Liverpool has been sentenced to life in prison and will serve a minimum of 42 years. Thomas Cashman shot the 9-year-old as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August last year. Outside court, the schoolgirl's mother, Cheryl Corbell, said her family had already started their life sentence, having to spend the rest of their lives without their beloved daughter, Olivia.
The government is setting out a new plan to ensure clean and plentiful supply of water for the future. The government wants to see more investment from water companies as well as tougher enforcement for those who pollute. It also could see a ban of plastic in wet wipes and restrictions on substances in textiles, cleaning products and paints.
And drivers are being warned to expect severe delays on the roads on Bank Holiday weekend, as up to 17 million trips are expected to be made. The RAC says major roads in southwest England and the home counties are likely to experience the worst congestion on Good Friday.
Well, Russian investigators have detained a woman in relation to the killing of pro-war blogger Vladlen Tatarsky, who was assassinated in a blast at a cafe in St. Petersburg.
It's an extraordinary story. It's like a real-life Netflix drama. Let's speak to the Defence and Foreign Affairs editor for The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Good morning to you, Con. So can you please just give us an outline of the individuals involved to paint a picture for the viewers about how this happened and why?
Well, good morning to you. Well, Tatarsky was a very prominent blogger in Russia. And the bloggers have played a fairly central role in the Russian campaign since they invaded Ukraine last year. That this was pretty central to trying to sort of boost morale amongst the Russian people. Remember, a lot of the media in Russia is state-controlled, so the ordinary Russian people don't get a pretty accurate description of what's going on in Ukraine. But these bloggers who are very loyal to Putin and the war effort and the Wagner Group and all these people that are involved in Ukraine, they're central to sort of almost sustaining morale and whipping up support for the cause. And in fact, some of them are so extreme that the Kremlin itself often tries to get them to calm down because some of them call for pretty extreme measures to be used in Ukraine, including the use of tactical nuclear weapons. So they're pretty hardcore people. And the fact that one of them has been killed, murdered, blown up in St. Petersburg, which is the traditional seat of Putin's power, that's where he learned his political trade, is pretty remarkable. And now, as you say, there's been an arrest. And it's a Russian woman. The Russians initially said it was Ukraine that did this, but this seems to be the enemy within, that the Russian people are finally starting to turn on those responsible for this dreadful war.
Yeah, but Daria Trepova has been arrested for the murder. She's an art graduate, anti-war. Her husband claims it's all a setup.
It could be. I mean, they're looking for a scapegoat. I don't know a great deal about this woman, but it's said that she's got links to the anti-Putin movement headed by Alexei Navalny, who, of course, is languishing in prison for daring to stand up to Putin. This is what happens to anyone in Russia that stands up to Putin. And, of course, you've had these groups like Pussy Riot back in a few years ago that were jailed for taking on Putin. A scapegoat very, very quickly. And whether or not this girl is responsible, we'll have to see. But it just shows that, not all is well in the state of Russia. And that, the suggestions that have been made recently that Putin's in a lot of trouble, that the economy is collapsing, the war is unpopular, that the casualties are unsustainable. Some of these issues are now coming home to roost.
Con, can I also ask you about NATO expansionism? Of course, at the start of this conflict, that was cited as an issue. We now have Finland joining NATO. How's that likely to land with Putin and the Kremlin?
Well, they won't be happy. But first of all, for NATO, this is a great moment. I mean, this helps to secure our northern flank against Russia. Of course, the Finns have bitter experience of fighting with the Russians over the years. part of their deal with Russia was to remain neutral, as did Sweden. And the fact that they've given up their neutrality and come into the NATO fold, first of all, shows the Russian threat to Europe is very serious and is not confined to Ukraine. And having Finland in NATO will be a great resource. As I said, it really helps us to defend our northern borders. And if we can get Sweden in as well, that would be an even greater boost.
OK, Con Coughlin, thank you for your expert analysis this morning. You're the Defence and Foreign Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph. Thank you very much for your time.
Now, coming up, should video games come with cigarette-style health warnings? We're going to be speaking to two mums with very different opinions on the matter.
And you're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 27 minutes past 7. Still lots to come on today's programme.
including stamps featuring the profile of King Charles, go on sale today. At 7:45, we'll ask a stamp expert about the history of royal stamps and what these ones could be worth in the future.
And who knew? It's International Carrot Day today, an annual celebration of the humble root vegetable, and my favourite as well. That'll be at 8:45. We'll be speaking to the king of big veg himself, Gerald Stratford, to find out the best way to grow our own.
I've got to say, every time I try and grow carrots, it's a spectacular disaster. End up going mouldy and rubbish. I do like a good carrot.
No, me too. Honey roasted on a roast.
Tarragon.
Absolutely, bit of tarrant. Lovely. Just a couple of views on the King's coronation on those stamps. You might have a point on this one. Christopher says, I don't think he can have a crown yet, as he hasn't been crowned until May.
That's a good point.
Perhaps that's why. We can ask our stamp expert later. And Pauline says, I do prefer the look of the new stamp with the crown, but surely he can't wear it yet, as he hasn't officially been given it. So I think you might be onto something there. Let us know what you think about the new stamps or any of the stories that we're talking about today. There's an awful lot going on today. gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
And now on to a fantastic debate that I'm sure is going to get you going. The video game industry generates over £5 million every year, but according to the World Health Organization, there's significant risk of addiction, with hundreds of teens around the country checking into rehab to help them kick the video game habit.
So, should video games come with health warnings? Well, let's speak now to the journalist and mum, Julie Cook, who's in the studio with us now, who believes gaming causes antisocial behaviour, and Lisa Dorman, the mother of gaming champion Jaden Ashman, who thinks gaming can create happy, healthy and successful lives. So good morning to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Julie, let's start with you. So do you believe, well, clearly you believe, that video games are addictive? Should they come with health warnings?
I think they are very addictive and they should come with health warnings. I've written about this and I've experienced it in my own family. My two children love video games, but I've done research on it that have found that, you know, that it's addictive as cocaine. When the dopamine receptors in the brain light up, just like they do with the drug, it happens when these kids see a video game. And it's also on Google, apparently. One of the recent studies found that the search engine found that 15% more searches are for gaming addiction than there are for crack cocaine addiction. So it's a huge, huge addictive problem.
Yeah, back in 2013, I made a TV show about porn addiction, and Cambridge University had just carried out a brain scan study into this precise thing. And they did show that young guys who were shown stimulus of gaming, their brains were reacting like a heroin brain. So maybe there's something in what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's... If you'd asked me this question 4 years ago before lockdown, I would have said, no, it doesn't need a warning, it's just bad parenting, you know, put the kids on for 20 minutes and be a strong parent. But then lockdown happened, and what I found was I gave my kids carte blanche. Go on there, talk to your friends, at least you'll still have a social life. But of course, after that, old habits die hard, and, you know, it's hard for them to then get back to reality afterwards, and I found it quite hard with my two.
Lisa, let's go over to you, shall we? Because your son has become a massive success from being a gamer.
He has, yes.
So tell us a bit more about your son then. So you wouldn't see it as an addiction, you'd see it as something that he's very, very good at and is lucrative as well.
Obviously, in the early days, when Jaden first became successful, he was only 15 years old. And at the time, I can honestly say I didn't really know too much about the gaming world. But after following his success, I had to learn pretty quickly about the gaming community as a whole. And to be fair, as you can see in Jaden's pictures there, Jaden leads a very healthy, active lifestyle now. He probably didn't back then, but I think that was a lot down to age and stuff. But I do think with gaming, yes, there are negatives, and I think, you know, almost anything can become addictive. And I do know, because I've got two boys who particularly love gaming with completely different personalities. And I do feel that a health warning is something that is, I think, you know, I don't think it needs to come with a health warning. I do think more active parenting would play a huge part, because I think both of my children, both of my boys who love gaming, really enjoy me participating in them playing the game. And, you know, I think when you've got, you know, busy lives, you haven't got, you know, the opportunity to spend time watching them play the game. But, you know, you do have to put restrictions in place. But now I think the gaming community's changed and it's a lot more positive.
OK. Julie, what do you make of that, then, that it needs to come down to active parenting rather than...
Well, do you know, I used to say that myself, and I consider myself quite an active parent. You know, I certainly look at what they're doing. But I think it's all too easy to say that and almost to blame parents for what happens when you're giving your kids access to this stuff, which is proven to be as addictive as cocaine. You know, it's all very well and brilliant. Well done to Jayden. You know, he's done incredibly well from it. But I think 99% of other people who play those games won't do as well as Jayden and may find themselves addictive. And not everybody has active parents. What about children in neglectful homes or where the parents work a lot and they can't give the children time? That game becomes almost a family substitute or a friend substitute, and it's very, very hard for the kids to then come off that.
Lisa, what do you make of that, then? Do you think Jayden is the exception rather than the rule? He's a lucky one in this.
To be fair, you know, as much as obviously I sympathise and I do obviously appreciate that a lot of people haven't actually got active parents around them. And me, myself, if I'm honest, when Jayden was playing in the early days, I didn't really participate in what he was doing online. You know, I didn't really realise, you know, how big it was. So, you know, I can honestly say, hands up, I was one of those parents who didn't really observe as much. But going forward, you know, I think anything can become addictive, you know, in context, obviously. But with gaming, you know, there are a lot of positives as well that come from it. I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of these children are very intellectual. You know, they've got really good communication skills. And this is not just based on my son only. Obviously, you know, I play an active part in the community with the parents, and they've kids from all different backgrounds. You know, but we are very supportive of each other. And I think, you know, at a certain age, a kid can get into something like football or any other sport, and they can become really sort of focused on that. But it is obviously, you know, the parents who can control how much time they spend on it. But if they enjoy it, they can have a good career. I mean, my son is 19 now. He's very self-aware. He leads a very healthy lifestyle, as well as a lot of his friends. He's living independently at 19. You know, he's got his own property. He has done really well out of it. You know, and it's not just that. I think a lot of the organisations and stuff now evolved in esports are developing and supporting these gamers to become healthier, more, you know, rounded individuals. So,
okay.
And I think it's something that's not going to go away.
OK, Judy, quickly, for people watching at home, what are the things that parents should be looking out for if they fear that their kids are getting addicted to games?
Locking themselves away in a room for long periods of time, refusing to come off the Xbox or the PlayStation, refusing to have meals with you, finding them on it late at night or in the middle of the night or the early hours, and then sort of stopping other activities because they'd rather game. I think they're all quite key things to look out for.
Yeah, really good practical advice there. Julie, Lisa, thank you so much for that. A gaming gamble. Yes, let us know what you make of that at home. GBNews at gbnews.uk. Are you a parent of a child who's addicted to video games? Is it something that you worry about? Or, like Lisa says, is it the way that the world is going? Is it actually making them very skilled?
It's interesting because there's loads of different conflicting data on this. So a lot of it is boys spend too much time doing it. It affects their sleep. They drink Red Bull the next day. They're grumpy. They're hard to control in class, especially if they have things like ADHD. But then there's other evidence showing it makes them think on a more cognitive level. It improves hand-eye coordination. So the evidence is mixed, and they've got two sides of the same story. That's what we do on GB News.
Yeah, exactly. Let us know what you make of that. It's certainly a discussion point, isn't it? Well, stay with us because we are going to discuss whether school pupils should face even more disruption in the classroom with more strikes planned. And we'll also be going through the papers with Stephanie Boyce and Mark Lehane. That's next.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:41 and we're going through the papers with you this morning, and we are joined by Stephanie Boyce, immediate past president of the Law Society, and Mark Lehane, the former advisor to Nadeem Zahawi. Good morning to you both. And Mark, let's start with you, shall we? This is in the Mail, a threat of strikes to disrupt pupils until Christmas.
That's right. So last week the government made a pay offer to teachers to try and bring the teacher strikes to an end. Yesterday morning, the National Education Union announced that they'd held a ballot of their members. 98% of those people that voted in that ballot rejected the pay offer from the government.
Yep.
So they've now announced there's going to be 2 more strike days that they'll be holding after Easter. And it's just really sad. I mean, you know, everyone's found it really tough the last few years. The pandemic was a nightmare for everybody. Schools really stepped up and did the best for kids through that time. It's really tough working in schools now, even though we are sort of post-pandemics, things have not got back to normal. So I understand why teachers are feeling run ragged and why they're feeling the cost of living pinches as well. But it's really sad that we can't get a deal and get teachers back to work without these strikes, because kids need it.
What was the deal that was rejected, Mark?
So they were offered a £1,000 lump sum for every teacher this academic year, and then from September there was a 4.5% pay rise offered, right, that was largely going to be funded out of existing school budgets. I feel obliged to say this, it doesn't make me very popular on social media, but the school's budget this September is going to be the biggest ever. It's going to go up by another £3.5 billion. But what schools were demanding was that all the extra money for pay be funded by extra money from the government on top of that.
Because that's what they had an issue. I've been covering the teacher strikes quite a lot. are. And speaking to teachers, it's the fact it comes out of the school's budget, because they're saying, well, that directly impacts on the kids. If we take that 2%, I mean, that's fewer school trips, that's fewer TAs. You can understand why they would say that, because you're ultimately in it for the children, aren't you?
Yes, except all I would say is, like, what do people think a school's budget is to be spent on, other than teachers? 80% of a school's budget typically spent on...
trips and support staff.
Well, but that's what the schools are funded to do, and so there's an extra £3.5 billion going in. It will be the biggest in cash terms school budget ever per pupil, and people knew that extra money was coming in order to bump up the amount of money that they had to pay more in salaries. And the Institute for Fiscal Studies agreed, when Jeremy Hunt found the extra £2 billion for schools back in the autumn statement, that there was some headroom for higher pay rises. But that's what I get, the people are frustrated.
Can I bring you in on this, Stephanie? Because one of the things people talk about a lot is making strikes illegal in schools, or at least making schools, if you like, essential workplaces that forfeit the right to strike. Is that something that would be permissible, or even something that could be pursued legally, or is it just political talk?
Well, I mean, the right to strike, there is no set right to strike. It's the right to, convene, the right to gauge views, because there are a number of steps that have to be followed before strike can take place. Yeah. So I think we'll struggle to find the right to strike as set out on our statute books. I think the difficulty here, there are a number of factors with lots of the strike action that's going on, is that a number of parties have settled with some interesting figures, percentage increases, and I think it puts those who haven't settled in a difficult position, because why should they settle for less when others have achieved more? But I do think, if we are... One of the things that Nigel Lawson talked about was getting the country, getting Britain great again and getting the country back working. If we are to become an economic powerhouse, if we are to retake our place on the global stage, we have to ensure that our children, future citizens, well, not future citizens, but future voters and so forth, are properly equipped and educated. And if teachers are not paid properly, and we see a number of public servants who fall into this arena, who are providing vital public services, who are not getting the pay or the recognition that they absolutely deserve.
And I suppose something else to point out in terms of the school budget is it's been affected by the cost of living as well as everything at the moment. I mean, they've got heating bills, the cost of food. I mean, all of those things, and I'm sure are being taken into account. Stephanie, let's go over to you now on something totally different, quite distressing, really, that we even need something like this. In today's world, it's a trial of a date rape wristband that changes colour if drink's a drug. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, so this is an article that's appeared in today's Metro, where it talks about an accessory. Accessories would only need a drop of liquid on them, which I think is this wristband, to detect if your drink was tainted with a common date rape drug, which would then sound the alarm by changing colour in minutes. But what the article doesn't tell us is that... is it to be worn? How does it work? Do you put it into your drink? So I'm not clear how it's going to work. But what the article does go on to say, of course, is that, drug rape is still an issue in this country, but it's very rare. And what the police are advised in bars and establishments to do is to put caps on glasses, drinks. Don't leave your drink unattended, and if you do, don't go back and drink it.
I suppose anything to keep women safe. I mean, we should encourage these sorts of products coming out. I mean, we've seen nail polish before, haven't we, where you dip your nail polish in the drink and it changes colour. So now we've got an accessories version, really. It's sad, really, that we almost have a whole range of products to keep women safe, but we need them, don't we, sadly?
Absolutely, and this is being trialled, if I understand correctly, by Essex Police, who are looking for funding to be able to trial this fully. So it's an interesting concept, and if it works, absolutely. If it keeps people safe, then absolutely.
OK, Mark, moving on to you now. You're Mr Strike this morning. There's another strike. We talked about this yesterday. Passport delays.
Yeah.
There's a walkout of 1,000 staff affecting all the major offices. It could mean how long do we have to wait for our passport?
Yeah, and I really feel for people who right now are discovering they've got to renew their passport to get away this summer, and suddenly they're facing the fact that they may not get it back in time. This is another example of the public sector unrest that there is right now. Again, like with the teachers, like with NHS and the train drivers and so on, I hope we can find a deal quickly. My worry about this particular story is even if they find a deal quite quickly, I think there's been enough disruption that it may mean lots of people still don't get their passports for this summer. And when you add into that the delays we're seeing in Dover and elsewhere with people trying to get out of the country, it's just making it that much harder for people to get that week away in the sun, which lots of people rely on to get through the long winter.
Yeah, and it's compounded by BA strikes at Heathrow. They're coming over the Easter weekend as well. I mean, if you're trying to get away, it could be a headache, couldn't it?
And what it really brings home is the evil that inflation is, OK, guys? And all of these stories we're covering, Nigel Lawson was one of those titans of, who we talked about earlier on, a titan of economics, because he helped to get the economy into a shape to try and keep inflation down, because when inflation gets out of control, as we've seen the last few years, it divides people, it undermines people's standard of living, and it causes all of this unrest.
Yeah. A topic I'd love talking about this one. Stephanie, now it's on to you. Voter ID. Something that's been talked about for many years. Tony Blair, of course, wants to bring it in years ago. He wants it back again now. A huge hoo-ha, and the story today is what it could suppress turnout.
Absolutely. So there is a concern. So, first of all, voter ID is going to be a requirement. The Elections Act of 2022 saw that for UK parliamentary elections, police and crime commissioner elections in England and Wales, and local council elections in England, voter ID is required. And normally that's some existing ID, driving licence, passport. I think, Mark, you said over 60s travel card. But if you don't have none of those, don't worry, because you can apply online or via post for what is called a voter authority certificate, which you can then produce. But, of course, this was all brought in to combat electoral fraud and to strengthen the UK electoral system. But, of course, what individuals are concerned about, parties are concerned about, is the low turnout, because some elections that are due to take place on the 4th of May, which is a couple of days before the King's coronation on the 6th of May, may mean that people are going away. They haven't applied for a postal vote. I believe that you can still apply for a postal vote. You're still within time if you do it now. But that may contribute to the low turnout, coupled with voter ID and people going away. OK, very quickly, Mark, they have voter ID in 47 European states. Why not Britain?
Yeah, I mean, I've changed my mind on this. I originally started off quite worried about the voter ID. I think traditionally we've rocked up in this country, been able to vote without showing who we are. I think given all the other things that we have in modern life, where we have to prove who we are before we can do it, including going into a pub, you know, often you have to show ID, I don't have a massive problem with this, provided we can find lots of ways for people who don't have those standard IDs to get it.
We've talked about this all morning. However, I've been told in my ear we must move on. Once again, thank you for you guys.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, Mark, and you're with us in the next hour as well. Now, brand new stamps featuring the profile of King Charles are available to buy from today.
Yeah, Royal Mail unveiled the print, and here it is, which features an image of King Charles III without a crown earlier this year.
Yes, we're joined now by editor and avid stamp collector Mike Goodman for his view. Good morning to you, Mike. So we've got the stamps here. I'll hold them up to the camera, to number 2. Hopefully that's low enough for you guys. Without a crown. We've been talking about this morning, Mike. Now, is this because King Charles has not yet been crowned, or is this him, you know, talking about a modern monarchy, a more casual approach, perhaps?
I think it's more to do with the modern monarchy. The image is taken from a portrait by Martin Jennings, which has already appeared on the new 50p coin, which was first minted last year. And coin collectors like I also collect coins, and I have got one of those coins with the 2022 date on it. I think basically they've just adapted the design of the Queen Elizabeth stamps, which showed the Queen facing right, and the iconic Machin head, and adapted it for the King.
OK, as well as the fact that he's not wearing his crown, I would like to see him wearing a crown personally. I think it's better to look regal, not like you're kind of dressing down for the office on a Friday. People want to know, are these stamps going to be worth a few quid? Should we go out and buy a load?
No.
No. That's it, just to say no. Not even a few quid, nothing, not even worth buying a collection set.
The first and second class stamps may be worth hanging on to, because if postage rates carry on increasing as they do, they will still be valid for the appropriate service. You can actually use first and second class stamps that were first issued in the 1990s.
All right then. So looking back through time, what are the kind of royal stamps that are worth getting your hands on? What kind of values do they go for?
These examples are from an article. These are from my collection, and they were used in an article in the Current Stamp Lover about the image of the Queen on Canadian stamps, and basically I think that most of them were worth about a few pence or 50 pence each, or maybe the odd £1.
OK, great. Well, Mike, thank you for your time this morning. It's a shame not worth a few quid. We've got a few there, Hallie.
I know.
Anyway, let's move on.
We'd be in for a fortune. Not quite. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you.
There's an awful lot of British stamps which are just useful for postage.
Yeah, they have their practicalities. They're very expensive these days, about £1. Thank you very much, Mike, for your time. Well, stay with us. Still lots more to come on Donald Trump as he prepares for his arrest in New York later on today.
But first, Stephen Keats has your all-important Tuesday weather forecast.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecasting. It's a cold old start out there for many places this morning, isn't it? Touch of frost in a good number of places. Plenty of sunshine though, but always cloudy and a little bit more damp towards the far northwest, and that's because we've got this weather system edging in from the Atlantic, coming up against this blocking area of high pressure, so it's not going to make much further southeastwards progress. For many places it's going to be a dry day. So lots of sunshine out there this morning. Yes, it is quite cold, but those temperatures will rise quite quickly underneath the strong April sunshine. The sunshine across eastern Scotland, southern Scotland, parts of West Wales and Western England will turn a bit hazier as we move on through this afternoon as high cloud spills across. But the cloudiest skies will always be across parts of Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, although rainfall amounts here generally fairly minimal, not amounting to much. And after that chilly start, temperatures recovering quite widely into the low teens, and with light winds in the south, it should feel quite warm, although an onshore breeze around some southern and eastern coastal counties will take the edge off the temperatures. Through Tuesday evening then, the rain in the northwest will get its act together, become a bit heavier, a bit more persistent for parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland. And ahead of this, a veil of cloud will extend its way further south and east across much of the rest of the UK, so it won't be as cold to take us into Wednesday morning as it has been for a couple of mornings this week, although still the odd pocket of frost possible across the far southeast where the greater chance of seeing a few clear skies exist. But Wednesday will be a different looking day for the majority of us, certainly for England and Wales, with more cloud in the skies. This area of rain slowly shuffling its way into parts of northern England and West Wales. The wettest conditions again across parts of Northern Ireland initially, parts of Scotland, but brightening up in the far northwest with a few showers. And temperatures not dissimilar to what we saw earlier in the week, but we'll have lost the sunshine, so probably a cooler feel for most of us. So it's a bit more unsettled for a time midweek with some rain or showers around. Hopefully by Friday turning a little bit drier and brighter for most, and temperatures fell on the most part in the low teens, peaking around 15 or 16.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Donald Trump bunkers down in New York as he prepares to become the first former president to face criminal charges.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday the 4th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
And here's what's leading news this morning. Donald Trump has arrived in New York ahead of a historic court appearance today. Reports suggest he will face 34 felony charges, yet plead not guilty.
Tributes are pouring in for the former Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who has died at the age of 91. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hailed him as a transformational Chancellor and an inspiration.
And a poll marking Keir Starmer's 3rd anniversary as Labour leader today has revealed that almost half of voters believe he has not set out a clear vision for the party or the country.
The man who murdered 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel has been jailed for life. Thomas Cashman refused to appear in the dock as he was sentenced to a minimum of 42 years in prison.
And commemorative stamps featuring the profile of King Charles go on sale today. The monarch faces to the left in the image, a tradition that goes back to the days of Queen Victoria.
but not wearing a crown.
Yeah, which I think he should have a crown. Look a bit more royal.
Yeah, I think somebody's been in touch to say that. Sean says, I know it's the modern era, but I still love royal tradition. Charles' job is to be king. He needs the ceremonial bling.
Yeah.
Let us know what you make of that or any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So to our dramatic top story, former US President Donald Trump has arrived in New York as he prepares to become the first former US president to be arrested.
Yes, Mr. Trump is due to surrender at the Manhattan District Attorney's office later today before appearing in front of a judge for an arraignment where he will plead not guilty.
Our political editor Darren McCaffrey is in New York and has all the latest.
Well, Donald Trump has been hunkered down in Trump Towers all of last night here in Manhattan with his family, with his legal advisors, ahead of what is to be an historic day here in the United States. The first time a former or current president has ever appeared in a court charged effectively with a crime. Now, later on, President Trump is going to travel a relatively short distance from Trump Tower down to Lower Manhattan, where he will first of all meet with the District Attorney of Manhattan, where he will be fingerprinted. We think, though it is unlikely that he is going to be handcuffed or indeed have his mugshot taken. He will then appear in court itself, where he'll be in front of a judge and have the charge sheet read out against him. Now, we think he's going to face at least one charge of business frauds, though some media reports in the United States say the charge sheet could be up to 30 separate charges. We're going to have to wait for that. It will only be revealed in court later on. President Trump is going to deny all of those charges, though his lawyer has repeatedly made that clear that he is up for the battle of trying to exonerate himself throughout this process. Now, we're not entirely sure whether this legal proceeding, the bit in court, which is going to be relatively short, we think around 50 minutes long, is going to be televised or not. There have been meetings today between essentially the judge and legal officials and the broadcasters here in the United States who do want it televised, though Donald Trump's team have made it clear they do not. They feel that it would add to a circus-like atmosphere. And then after that short appearance, President Trump is going to head straight to the airport, back on his plane and back to Florida, where later on tonight he's going to address his supporters down at Mar-a-Lago. And again, I'm sure he's going to reiterate the message we've heard time and time again, that he feels that this is a bit of a witch hunt, that he's been prosecuted, and that in the end this is part of a political process to deny him the ability to run in the 2024 presidential election. The other thing to look out for today is protests. We are expecting some Trump supporters to gather effectively here in New York again a little later on. We don't know how many. So far, yes, there's been a few protesters, either down in Florida or indeed here in New York, but not any great numbers, though that may well change later on today. And there's been a warning from the mayor of New York to those protesters to be on their best behaviour. So it is going to be a fascinating day, a day in which history will be made, and a day which also could make history in another way, in that it could set the template, the tone, and indeed change the course of not just President Trump's attempt to become the nominee for the next presidential election, but indeed his attempts to become that president in 2024.
That's our political editor, Darren McCaffrey in New York. Well, earlier we spoke to the political commentator Steve Gill, who said this arraignment could lead to a constitutional conflict.
Be a spectacle, and that's part of what President Trump wants. There are reports that he was given the opportunity to do this arraignment by a Zoom. He's preferring to go in daylight, even though they've apparently negotiated no handcuffs, perhaps no mugshot, although the president has made comments that his mugshot will become the most famous mugshot in history and that you'll see it on T-shirts and mugs and everything else. The president is going to draw attention to this. And the other sideshow is that you have a partisan Democrat judge who will be overseeing this, who is reportedly considering imposing a gag order on the president to keep him from talking about this case, which would be questionable from a constitutional standpoint, particularly when you have an announced presidential candidate who would then be gagged by a court order by a judge who is a partisan Democrat.
Well, it's an extraordinary state of affairs, and let's speak to the Professor of International Politics at University College Dublin now, Scott Lucas. Scott, you had a bit of a set to with Steve Gill earlier on the show on GB News. That's fair to say you don't agree with a word he says.
Well, let's start with the facts of the case so that your listeners and viewers know what to expect today. When Donald Trump goes into that courtroom at 2:15 this afternoon in Manhattan, as Darren McCaffrey was describing, he will be facing felony charges, not misdemeanor charges. We don't know the exact charges until the indictment has been unsealed, but officials have let it be known that, yes, he could face more than a year in prison if any of the counts are upheld. And significantly, people have told the media in the U.S., several leading outlets, that we're talking about at least 24 charges and more than 30 charges possibly. If that is the case, this is not just about Donald Trump's alleged payoff to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star, to keep her quiet before the 2016 election.
Oh, he's frozen there.
Yeah, looks as though we might have just lost connection to Scott Lucas. We will try and reconnect with Scott, and we'll let you know if we manage to do so. It is going to be a history-making day, whatever happens today. Mr. Trump being the first former US president, first US president ever in history to face criminal charges. He will be heading from Trump Tower down to that Manhattan court later on this afternoon. And you can see the barricades being put up in New York. They are expecting protests there. Darren McCaffrey is in New York, and of course he will bring that to us here on GB News.
OK, another huge political story this morning. Nigel Lawson, the Chancellor who spearheaded Margaret Thatcher's privatisation and tax-cutting agenda, has passed away at the age of 91.
Yes, tributes have poured in for the Tory grandee, including from the Prime Minister, who described him as an inspiration to me and many others.
And former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he was the fearless and original flame of free market conservatism.
Well, one man who remembers Nigel Lawson personally is former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor. Good morning to you, David. So tell us your memories of Nigel Lawson. He was your first boss, wasn't he, when he was in the Department of Energy in 1981?
That's right. He went to the Department of Energy as his first cabinet job, and I was hauled along as the little kid on the block. And, yeah, it was I didn't really know Nigel before that. I soon got to know him. He was an ebullient, bouncy, Tigger-like figure who had a huge brain and, of course, a lot of experience. He'd got to the top of financial journalism, so he knew exactly all the arguments. He knew how to put the arguments. But what was marked him out, I think, from a lot of people who have followed after him, he had a passionate belief in the power in terms of making an economy really move in the right direction of low taxation. And his big achievement was to reduce at a stroke the top rate of tax from 60% to 40%. And yet, the first year it was 40%. He raised more money than the last year it was 60%, which obviously proved what was to him an important point, that taxation does not inhibit the growth of an economy, provided it's pitched at the right level. All too often in Britain, it's been pitched at the wrong level.
Don't think it's a sign of the times, David, that we have a Tory party today with the highest tax regime since World War II, yet Prime Minister Rishi Sunak put a poster of Mr Lawson up in his office the day he was made leader. Should we bring back some of the spirit of Nigel Lawson to try and save the party from wipeout?
Well, I mean, that's exactly the right question to ask. And of course, I can only answer, yes, of course we should, because basically Nigel Lawson, Margaret Thatcher had the vision. Nigel Lawson was the practical man. Now, he didn't get everything right. The exchange rate mechanism, which did for the Tories in the run-up to after the 1992 election and really consigned them to defeat in 1997. He was in favour of that because, ironically, a man who was, in the end, so anti-Europe was actually quite in favour of European mechanisms at that time. But the point is exactly as you say. What Nigel Lawson wanted to do was to make a tax regime that assisted the process of creating an entrepreneurial society. And of course, he understood. You feel with quite a lot of other chancellors, they don't really understand. You know, they're given a big toy and they play with it, but they don't know what they're doing.
He was famously critical, wasn't he, of Boris Johnson's commitment to net zero. And he was also a Brexiteer. He was anti-Europe, but he still loved it because he retired there.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is the irony. Nigel Lawson, I didn't see as much of Nigel Lawson as I would like to have done because he hung out in France. So he was, let's put this about Nigel. He was not a man who was predictable. He loved living in France, but it didn't annoy him or embarrass him to make these ferociously anti-European broadcasts from the heart of France.
David, and finally, what's your fondest personal memory of time you spent with Nigel?
Well, the thing about Nigel Lawson is he was famously short-tempered, but that often depended on whether, and this will be self-serving, and forgive me if it is, if he liked or respected the person that he could have been short-tempered with. And I was supposed to be doing an adjournment debate. Now, an adjournment debate comes at the end of a parliamentary day, and the most junior minister you can find is sent down to answer an adjournment debate. The business of the House of Commons collapsed. And in that era, don't forget, we had no mobile phones or anything like that. They couldn't find me. So Nigel Lawson was hauled out of a busy cabinet committee and sent down to the House of Commons to be me and reply to this adjournment debate. So when they finally tracked me down, I went along with my little knees knocking and thought to myself, this is it, you know, he's going to chew me up. Anyway, he growled at me and my little knees were knocking and he said, terrible, terrible, you can't do that again. And then he put his hand on my shoulder and said, but don't worry about it. These things happen. And, you know, his bark was worse than his bite. And, you know, I look back on Nigel Lawson and I think with him and Ken Clarke, these were the two most formidable people that I ever worked for because they were big people, big, intelligent people. They understood what they were doing, but they also had a personality that allowed them to grapple with all of the tensions and problems of top politics, whilst at the same time always appearing to be on top of the job. And, you know, I mean, I know it's a cliche and it's probably a bit sad to say it, but they don't make them like that these days. And I want to pray this morning that Rishi Sunak, as well as having a photo of Nigel Lawson in his office, also has the ability to be Nigel Lawson and to be a big man, because he's got a big job to do. And the issue is he a big enough man to have that photo on his walls?
Well, David Mellor, thank you so much for joining us on the programme and paying such beautiful tribute to your former boss, Nigel Lawson, who's died at the age of 91.
OK. Today marks the third anniversary of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party. But how well has he done?
Well, polling by YouGov has found that almost half of voters say he has failed to set out a clear vision. Well, we're joined in the studio by our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you, Olivia. Well, this doesn't look good, does it? Half of voters are pretty uninspired.
Yeah, it's not brilliant news for Keir Starmer. His strategy before Rishi Sunak came to office was essentially to show himself as the safe pair of hands in the room, the grown-up in the room. And his motto was, the country's broken as it is, and these bunch of clowns aren't going to be able to fix it. Well, that was all very well under Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss's quite tumultuous times in office. But with Rishi Sunak in government, he is very much a sort of sensible politician. He's a bit of a technocrat. He's a diplomat. He's been very serious. He's done lots of diplomacy, as it were, in the first few months of this year, signing the AUKUS Pact, agreeing the Windsor Framework. So now Keir Starmer has got got to do more. And he knows that. He said himself that his strategy was to fix Labour, then to show that this government isn't fit for governing, and then to answer the question, why me, why not them? But he doesn't seem to have got to the third stage of that yet, and we are actually getting quite close to an election now.
I wonder if, his critics might say that he does more U-turns than Jeremy Clarkson on Brexit, on controlling our borders, on liking the union flag or not, and on trans issues. But is he actually playing canny politics here by being an everyman who can switch his position? He's not divisive like Corbyn. And does that widen his appeal by being more neutral, more centrist?
Well, I think you might have a point there, because one of the things that really struck me in this poll in the Times today, showing that he isn't seen to have a clear vision for the country, was that actually among those who think that Keir Starmer has done either a great or a good job, 9% are people who voted Conservative at the last election. And of course, those are the people who Keir Starmer really needs to win over. So it could be that though his popularity, if we can call it popularity, isn't particularly deep, it might be quite broad. And if there are enough people, he might feel, that just don't want the Tories out after 13 years in government, don't forget, then he might just benefit from that. But I think there is definitely a realisation in Labour now that they can't just rest on their laurels with this very different number 10 operation, this competent, slick number 10 operation. They are going to have to prove some reasons why people should vote for Labour. Now, whether they're doing that yet, it's hard to say. I mean, they had some bold reforms on childcare, but of course the government nicked their clothes and the budget and did something even bolder than Labour was suggesting. I mean, their plans for crime announced yesterday, essentially a new version of an ASBO, which obviously has already been done. The Conservatives have a similar mechanism in place at the moment, but no one really knows about it. It wasn't exactly groundbreaking stuff. So the question now seems to be, can Labour get away with just not being the Conservatives? And that's up to Rishi Sunak.
Olivia Ratley, really good to have you with us. Thank you so much. Now, today, the Environment Secretary, Therese Coffey, will reveal her proposal to clean up Britain's waters.
The plan aims to bring in more investment from water companies, a ban on plastic wet wipes and tougher penalties for polluters.
Well, our national reporter Theo Chacomba joins us now from Henley-on-Thames. And Theo, sewage is a real problem there, isn't it?
It is, yes. Good morning. So we're just by the River Thames, which runs through here on Henley-on-Thames. And river sewage is particularly a problem here. But of course, the plans that are being announced today by the government include a whole raft of things. One thing in particular they are keen to tackle is things like this. So water bottles, plastics and more, which end up in rivers like this, have an impact on biodiversity and, of course, the river as well. Mostly in this area, the river here is used by people in swimming clubs, water sports and more. Many of them have been campaigning for years about the quality of water that comes through here in Henley-on-Thames. Now, one thing in particular that they do want to see change is the river discharge from sewage that comes into this river. And in terms of the government plans, they are keen on highlighting the investment, stronger regulation, tougher enforcement on water companies. But a lot of people say these are things that have been said before. There is over £1 billion worth of investment that had been ring-fenced to improve the waterworks across the country, and this has now been brought forward, something which opposition members have said, why are they bringing this up again? This isn't new. We want to see change now. Now, in terms of what's been happening across the country, in Wales in particular, just recently in the last few days, they've announced that 600,000 hours worth of sewage went into their waters. That's something they are wanting to be addressed. That was statistics from the Welsh Water Company in the last few days. In terms of the response from Labour, they say the announcement is nothing more than a shuffling of deck chairs and a reheating of old failed measures that simply give the green light for sewage dumping to continue for decades to come. And also the Liberal Democrats, Tim Farron, who is the environment spokesperson, he said yet again the Conservative government is taking the public for fools by re-announcing a wet wipe policy from 5 years ago. Now, it's not just rivers, it's also at beaches as well, where there's been some troubles there with discharge going into the water. But pollution, river pollution, is particularly a big problem here in Henley-on-Thames.
Theo Chicombo, you're completely right. This is a really serious issue that wreaks havoc in communities, and you can see behind you just how beautiful Henley is, and it's so important to keep it that way. Thank you so much, Theo.
OK, it's 8:21. Let's bring you up to date with all the rest of today's top stories.
And the man who murdered Olivia Pratt-Korbel in Liverpool has been sentenced to life in prison and will serve a minimum of 42 years. Thomas Cashman shot the 9-year-old as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August of last year.
A teenager fatally stabbed in Leeds has been named by police as Jamie Meir. The 18-year-old died in hospital after being attacked in the Army district of the city on Friday. West Yorkshire Police arrested a 30-year-old man on suspicion of murder. He has now been released on bail.
New British stamps will feature the King's image for the first time today. They feature Charles's head and neck facing left, as all monarchs have done since Queen Victoria, but he isn't wearing a crown. Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Do keep them coming in on any of the stories that we've been talking about. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We're having a little debate earlier about video games and should they come with a health warning. Jack's been in touch saying, I have 3 grown-up lads. They all played video games, but all 3 dropped the games when they just discovered girls. And Lance says the opposite, actually. For years, brain surgeons have played video games. It really improves hand-eye coordination and it's been proved to help children with those sorts of skills too. Two different sides of the coin there.
Yeah, there always are on GB News. And here's a story I've been dying to cover all morning. I know you haven't been quite so keen, Ellie, but something in today's Sun is a marriage of 2 feasts, the Yorkshire pudding and the lasagna. Now, to me, that looks like heaven. This is £4. It's on sale at Iceland. And in terms of late night delights, to me, that looks like heaven on a plate.
Really?
What do you think out there? Is that a turn off or a turn on to me? I think it looks gorgeous.
I think it looks awful. Well, it looks like something from, like, April Fools. It just feels like a little bit late. But no, it doesn't do it for me.
Apparently, they're a smash hit with viewers. They're selling out. Some people say it's got a very weird taste. It went in the bin. Other ones said, bravo, what a taste sensation. And for a little bit of Italian flair, one Iceland shopper, this may be the Sun, but a bit of artistic licence, they said, mamma mia.
Mamma mia.
Yeah.
Well, it's weird, isn't it? Sometimes you get these food combinations that you think shouldn't go together, but then they do actually end up tasting really good.
My favourite is doner meat on a kebab.
Oh, right. Well, I don't...
No, sorry, doner meat on a pizza.
I was about to say, I feel like that is the way it's supposed to go.
See, I've got doners on the brain.
Wait, doner meat on a pizza, yeah, or pineapple on a pizza. I mean, I think that's blasphemy, and there you go. And other people think it's great. Let us know your odd food combos. What works for you? GBViews at gbnews.uk. But stay with us. We'll have the latest on that spectacular Everton goal that saw them draw with Tottenham last night. Coity is going to be having his say next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, it's 8:28. Still lots to come on today's programme.
And it's International Carrot Day, of course, you knew that. And at 8:45, we'll talk to the king of big veg, Gerald Stratford, about what he loves most about the iconic orange root vegetable.
Imagine being the king of big veg.
I love it.
After 9 a.m, legendary tabloid editor Eve Pollard will give us her take on Trump's imminent arrest as he prepares to face the music in New York.
And please get involved. You can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or, of course, tweet us @gbnews.
Let's get the latest from the sporting world. Coitie's with us in the studio. How are you?
When you were talking about the iconic orange vegetable, I thought you were talking about Donald Trump there for a minute. I thought it was
nice
a little
one. Nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
That's why you paid the big money.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Right, we're going to start with the football with you, Coitie. So, Everton Tottenham last night.
Oh, goodness me. So, Spurs could have gone third should they won. Everton fighting for survival and ended up 1-1. Spurs went ahead. But there's big stories from the game. Now, one of these is Harry Kane, who, of course, you know I will never have a bad word said about the England captain. I love him very much. But he was fouled by Abdoulaye Doucouré. Now, it was finger. This is we see the penalty there. That's him scoring the penalty. But it was just before then because they went down to 10 men and. Doucouré, there was a little coming together there, a little slightly off the ball, and then Doucouré's if you put your hands in anybody's face, you're going to face a red card. So what he's actually done, he's put his hand toward, it looked very quickly, hand towards Harry Kane's face. Harry Kane goes down. Oh. People would say like a sack of carrots, possibly. Went down on the floor, 25 seconds down there, rolling around, and then people think, there's nothing in that. But, I mean, the fingers were pretty much in the face. Okay. So it was pretty nasty.
We haven't got any pictures. Shall we do a reenactment?
Would you like that?
Yeah,
OK.
I'll be Harry.
OK. Honestly, I can't do it to you because you're Harry. I could never... So anyway, the fingers have gone in there, and now... Shall I do the whole thing?
Yeah,
what do you think? So there's that, and then there's a bit of face being squeezed. Look at that. Actually, I'm quite enjoying this. So anyway, squeeze. So then, as that's gone down, he's gone down, and then a sending off.
So it was a red card in your eye?
Absolutely. Yeah. Nobody disagrees with that. But Harry Kane has got a bit of a tough time for saying, he went down too easily, but no.
Now, for Toffees fans, that crucial point has thrown them a lifeline. Let's move on to some of tonight's fixtures. Nottingham Forest fan myself here. Everton have leapfrogged.
I thought we'd spend more time with Nottingham Forest before we've even finished the Everton game. But OK, get your priorities right.
Tonight, we're playing Leeds, 6-pointer. The bottom of the table, Coity, is so tight. 5 points separate 8 places. It's going to go all the way to the wire, isn't it?
It is. No, but we've never seen anything like it. So you've got the top half, pretty much everybody's up for a chance in Europe, and then from below there, anybody can go down. Leeds are in 18th with 26 points. You've got your Nottingham Forest on 27 points. Steve Cooper, is he going to be the 14th manager that's going to be fired? At the moment, it can't happen.
Well, they still love him
because
there,
they're still fighting.
But Forest form on the road has been woeful. It's all to play for. I'm really nervous all the way through. Squeaky bum time if you're a Forest fan, or any of these teams down there.
OK, how many more sporting phrases can you use in that? We've heard them all. We've heard them all. Down to the wire, squeaky bum time. I've heard them. This is supposed to be my job here saying these.
And many other cliches.
Well, you've got to take each game as it comes there, Martin. That's what I'm going to tell you. So Leicester are playing Aston Villa. Brendan Rodgers obviously was fired a couple of days ago, so he's gone. Villa are looking very good. Huge game. Chelsea and Liverpool. Now, there's stories in the paper. Bruno Salter is the man who's the first-team coach now at Chelsea because he's taken over. Well, he's taken over for now as boss, but he said that he's never picked a team before, and this is just a small comment that he's happened to have made in the press conference. Well, you know, he's played for Brighton, played for Graham Potter, went with Graham Potter to Chelsea, and said, well, I've never picked a team. They're going, he's never picked a team? They've got this amateur, and what are they going to do? Picking a team is one thing.
And ironic, playing Liverpool, because there's also talk manager mayhem about Kloppy. Well, the love affair may be over with Klopp.
Well, whether the love affair's over, there's going to be changes at Liverpool going into next season with new players. Klopp is always going to be safe. He says if he doesn't have the history and if he didn't have the success he'd have in the past, then maybe he would have been one of those managers, which is fair comment, but he'll be OK for a while. And the other one, Bournemouth against Brighton, who are also doing extremely well, and Graham Potter probably now thinking, why did I go? Why didn't I stay where I was?
Coity, quick word on the golf.
Yes.
And the Masters Champions dinner, please.
Well, thunderstorms expecting at the Masters. There's live golf players that are going to be there, you know, the rival Saudi-backed golf tour. So thunderstorms, metaphorically, and also with the weather as well. So it could go long. But tonight is the Champions Dinner. There we are. There's the Champions Dinner menu. Now, every year at the Masters, the champion, the current champion, gets to choose the menu. So Scotty Scheffler this year. It sounds very much like Tiger Woods' menu, which was, you know, it's pretty
American, isn't it?
It's pretty straight. Cheeseburger sliders. I don't know what served Scotty style is. Firecracker shrimp. You've got tortilla soup, Texas ribeye steak or black and red fish.
Yum.
And warm chocolate chip skillet cookie. Milk and cookies ice cream.
Milk and cookies.
Just like Mrs. Scheffler used to make.
That sounds absolutely gorgeous, Coity. Thank you for bringing the dish today.
It's a pleasure.
And what would you have as your Masters?
I would... you know what? Would it be wrong to have egg, bacon and sausage and beans and a little something? Would that be wrong?
I would say yes.
OK, fine.
But very British.
But then again, there's less chance of me choosing that and becoming an actual professional golfer, so I never have to worry about making that choice.
All right.
Thank you, Coity,
Thank
for
you so much.
the best of British there. OK, well, stay with us. We'll be discussing the 50th anniversary of the mobile phone. Could you even live without yours these days? We'll be asking Stephanie Boyce and Mark Lehane next.
This is Breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8:38. We are going through the papers with you now this morning, and we're joined by immediate past president of the Law Society, Stephanie Boyce, and former special advisor to Nadeem Zahawi, Mark Lehane. Good morning to you both. Stephanie, let's start with you, shall we, in a very serious story about sewage in our rivers in the Telegraph.
Absolutely. So Theresa Coffey, the Environment Secretary, has come out today with the government's water strategy, saying that polluters will pay to clean up rivers. And she, also writing in today's Telegraph, talks about that companies will face unlimited fines, with money being ring-fenced to fund and control the penalties which to stop polluting companies polluting the waterways. Currently, the fines are capped at $250,000, but she's saying it will be unlimited. They've set out a number of initiatives that more rollout of water smart meters in the home, things that we can do as householders, and indeed developers, builders will be required to do to help us save water, because it is estimated that by within 20 years, England will have run out of water due to a combination of climate change and leaks. So the question I know everybody is burning to ask is, where is this money going to come from? Well, the money is going to come from customers. It's going to come from customer bills, which supposedly is not going to be put on bills until 2025. But I don't know about you, but I just recently got my water bill that's going up by some 11%.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. And one other measure that the government is seeking to introduce is that bonuses for companies should be paid out of profits rather than from customer bills.
Yeah, Mark, can I bring you in here? Because pollution has been a terrible stink, pun intended, for the Conservatives of late. It's really got people going, particularly when we're seeing the dramatic images of sewage on our beaches. Yesterday, John Redwood was attacked. He was saying holiday in Britain. Critics pointed out, well, 2/3 of the beaches are promoted. Wouldn't it be great if we could? Therese Coffey, a polled in Conservative homes. She's the very, very bottom of the cabinet on 2%. It's caused a huge problem, hasn't it, with the Conservative sewage?
It really has. And listen, everybody wants cleaner water. We want to be able to go and bathe in local rivers or at the seaside. What we mustn't lose sight of, though, is how much cleaner our rivers and our seas and our beaches have got in the last 20, 30 years anyway. That's one of the reasons why water bills have gone up. And I think the other thing that's important for people to remember is actually the water companies don't make huge profits. They largely do what they do based on government contracts and regulations. Their profits are regulated quite tightly. And in essence, we have reduced the amount of leaks that have gone on the last 20 years, rightly so. But if we want that cleaner water, if we want lower leaks, we are just going to have to pay for it as consumers out of higher bills. And I think we need to recognise that.
OK, Mark, let's stay with you. It's something totally different in the mail. It's the mobile phone. It's 50 years old.
That's right. So apparently it was 50 years ago this week that the first cell phone was launched and calls were made. I don't know about you, we've all got our phones here. I've got mine on me. Yeah. And I just thought it was an interesting story to look at because who'd have guessed 30 years ago that the devices would be so ubiquitous and we would be spending so much of our lives on there for good and ill. I'm trying to reduce how much I'm glued to it. I think my daughters, I've got 4 girls, I think they would argue that I spend too much time on there. But isn't it amazing how we've come? I guess the question now is how we keep mobile devices, how we keep our mobile phone in its place so it doesn't get between us and actually living and being with the people around us.
How old are your daughters?
9, 13, 14 and 16.
So do you worry about them, those teenage girls being on their phones? I mean, do you worry about the addiction of a mobile phone?
So we're quite strict about what they can and can't do. They're not allowed their phones upstairs. When they're with me, the youngest child is 9, doesn't have a phone. I actually think we know a lot more now than we did even 10 years ago about the impact on mobile phones. There is a clear link between the amount of screen time kids spend and how happy or unhappy they are. Yeah. I think we're probably moving towards a point where I think a lot of us would support a ban on smartphones, maybe under the age of 16. They're designed to be addictive, but that's a whole different story altogether.
It's interesting how we had a debate earlier, Stephanie, about video games being addictive, but as far as young girls go, I've got a young boy and a young girl, you know, TikTok and Instagram, you know, the stuff that makes young people feel ashamed of their bodies, of their inadequacies. Society has moved on so much, even in the last few years, and mobile phones play a big part of that, don't they?
Well, absolutely. If you look at the way that mobile phone has evolved in the last 50 years to get us to where we're at now. And of course, you know, there are a number of people who are coming out who are critical of technology, and in particular the algorithms and all of those things that perhaps potentially feeds into that addiction, whether it's by games or whether it's by the mobile phone. There is a real concern that actually, I mean, if you go to a restaurant, you know, I was at an awards ceremony the other night and everybody seemed to have their phone out. The conversation is almost not there anymore. So I do think that, you know, I think it probably would be a good idea for us to think about our own usage of electronic devices.
Do you think it has connected us, or do you think it has created that divide?
Listen, there's so many positives. I've got friends that live all around the world that we can stay in touch with for virtually no cost. I think, like a lot of new technologies, there's good and there's bad, and it just takes us a bit of time to figure it out. But there is no doubt the impact of smartphones and social media combined has had a really detrimental impact on young people's mental health in particular. So when you hear teachers talking about the mental health crisis, I think a huge chunk of that could be traced back to these devices and the amount of time young people spend on them, particularly late at night and particularly winding up one another as teenagers do, but at least in the old days you could only do it when you're with one another.
Well, my missus is a teacher, my cousin's wife is a head in London, and they all say at least keep mobile phones out of schools.
Oh, no brainer. I mean,
just get kids focused on learning and stop all the falling out on social media. That would be a great start. You want to talk about the corgis, don't you? You've been dying to talk about them all morning.
The Queen's corgis, they're in the stars, Stephanie. Apparently they're no longer grieving.
No, absolutely. So the Duchess, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, has been speaking to Radio 2, and what she says is that the corgis are done mourning. Their tails have gone up now, so she thinks they're over their grief, but every so often they'll bark at nothing, or what appears to be nothing, but she seems to think that perhaps is the late Majesty her Queen coming to visit.
Oh, that's so lovely, because I think for a lot of people on the day of the Queen's funeral, I was in Windsor, I think that's one of the images that really struck people and really upset people, actually, was that sight of the corgis waiting for the coffin to arrive. It's like they were welcoming her home almost.
And also the royal horse on the walkway on the Windsor Mile there with its head bowed. It's funny how animals sort of seem to cut through and get you in that sort of way, isn't it? I think many viewers with their own pets will completely empathise with that huge emotional bond that we get.
We were just talking in the ad break about the fact that it is Fergie who now has the corgis. Was it you, Mark, who was saying?
Yeah, well, my understanding is that in her later years, the Queen didn't get new puppies because she kind of thought she's a bit too old to look after them and wouldn't necessarily be around to be with them through all their lives. And my understanding is that Andrew and Fergie decided actually she was a bit lonely and she'd benefit from having some puppies around, and that's why she got some more.
Oh, so and she loved her corgis so very much, didn't she? Do we know the names of them, Stephanie? Did we find that out?
They're called Sandy and Muick, I think is how you pronounce that.
Sandy and Muick.
Regal names. Fittingly regal names. A more serious story here, Mark. The ongoing conversation about owning up to links for slavery, this time conversation about Manchester.
Yes, so the Guardian newspaper are doing a series of articles at the moment about how they've been grappling with the newspaper, its links to the cotton trade in Manchester traditionally and hence its involvement with slavery. And I think it's really interesting that even the Guardian which has for a long time been sort of holding other organisations and people responsible for their historic links, it's now looking at itself. What I think is really interesting, though, was an article I read, I think, yesterday by Lord Sumption, the former Supreme Court Justice, making the point that actually C.P. Snow, one of the great former editors of The Guardian, he wouldn't have bothered with stuff like this. The link was quite tenuous, and he feels the job of liberals is to make the world now a better place rather than to worry about the past, which you can't change.
So, Stephanie, very quickly, the conversations about slavery in terms of the historic prism, are they helpful or are they divisive?
Well, I mean, I think it's difficult, you know, in as much that I cannot think... I mean, there are parts of my own history that I know nothing about because it is steeped in slavery and the atrocities that were committed during those times. So I do think it's going to be difficult to say, to put that to one side and not have those discussions. Of course, everybody wants to focus on change, making the world a better place, making it more equal, where there is equality of opportunity and there's equity. So I think it's going to be difficult to have that full break and say we're not going to talk about it, because there will be people invariably who will want to talk about it.
Superb. Stephanie Boyce, Mark Lehane, you've both been magnificent this morning. Thank you for your input. It's been tremendous. Cheers.
Now, carrots are one of the UK's most popular root vegetables. I've got a bowl of them here.
Yes, so have I.
Oh, great. We've both got, you've got a good stack over there. Well, they can be enjoyed both sweet and savoury as well.
Yeah, and they're so loved that, believe it or not, every 4th of April, that's today, is International Carrot Day.
So, who better to tell us more about the humble veg and to grow our own is King of the Vegetables, Gerald Stratford. And we're both wearing orange, Gerald. It's like I knew it was International Carrot Day today. What do you love so much about carrots, Gerald?
Well, they're, apart from the potato and the onion, they're the next go-to veg.
OK, so why is it that today, April the 4th, when carrots aren't really even growing, let alone coming to fruition, is marked as International Carrot Day?
Different countries have different time spans. So somewhere in the world, a carrot will be growing and being harvested.
OK,
so,
I can notice...
in the year you eat them.
I can notice behind you on the wall there are some strategically placed root vegetables. Are they some of your prized specimens? Talk us through some of those.
I've also got...
Yeah, a little bit lower.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, they're good.
So you've grown them yourself, Gerald?
Those carrots I grew last year and harvested in September. And you can keep them in sand. In a bucket of sand, the carrot will stay over winter.
Wow.
And you just take them out of the sand, wash them, and use them.
So is that sand, I mean, you think that would dry them out? Would you keep the sand moist? Or?
No, it won't. It's just ordinary builder's sand. And it will last from October right through the winter until about now. They just started to show shoots of growth.
Oh, Gerald,
so you've had carrots of your own all winter.
Wow, that's a really good tip, actually, for people who want to grow their own carrots, that they can then keep them throughout the winter. For people who have got a garden, is it something you'd encourage them to do? Is it quite easy to grow carrots?
Yes, yeah, I find any vegetable easy to grow because I'm a fanatic. But it's not hard. I mean, these are all my seeds for the coming year. And that one there, I only planted last week. It's called Paris Market.
Looks more like a radish.
And it's a small round carrot, about the size of a 50p piece. And in a 10-litre bucket, I can grow between 10 and 12 Paris Market carrots. And I grow these once a week all the way through the summer. So I've got an ongoing crop of carrots. From about June onwards, I have fresh carrots.
Wow, you really know your carrots. I didn't even know there were that many varieties. Gerald, what's your favourite way to cook them?
Oh, mash. Get some carrots, get some potatoes, boil them together and mash them together. Carrot and potato mash is beautiful, but they're also incredibly nice roasted.
Mm. Yeah,
You
I
know,
roast them with a little bit of honey.
Yes. If you just steam a carrot, and then just before you serve it, sprinkle demerara sugar over the top.
Well, there's a
That is very nice. It's really nice.
Well, Gerald, you've had some fantastic tips there. So carrots grown in sand, demerara sugar on a steamed carrot. We're going to be taking those tips with us. Gerald, really good to meet you. I'm glad we're both wearing orange, and a happy International Carrot Day to you. We know you love them lots.
And to you, thank you.
There's a guy who can see in the dark, no matter how dark it is. Anyway, still to come, we'll have more on Donald Trump, who will become the first former US president to face criminal charges.
But first, Stephen Keats has your all-important Tuesday forecast.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Plenty of sunshine over the next few days as high pressure is in charge, but it does turn a bit wetter later on in the week. And we can see that in the pressure pattern. High pressure just sat to the east of us, keeping these weather fronts at bay. However, Wednesday into Thursday, they will manage to move in, bringing some cloudy conditions and rain for a time. Before then, that high pressure builds back in for the Easter weekend. So this morning, a cold start out there. Frost in places, but quickly melting away. Plenty of sunshine to come through the day, though the cloud does thicken and move in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern and Western Scotland, though it should generally stay dry here throughout the day. Best of the sunshine for much of England and Wales. Blue skies for everyone. Generally light winds. Chilly along the east coast. Temperatures still here struggling to get into double figures, 14 or 15 across some western areas in the best of the sunshine. Into the evening time, it will turn quite chilly as the sun begins to set under those clear skies. Cloud thickening for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland still, but an increasing risk of some patchy rain and drizzle moving in here into the early hours. And just notice the blues returning on the map by the end of the night, indicating a frost out there. Temperatures falling close to, if not below, freezing. So it means a chilly start to Tuesday morning, some ice around first thing, but this will quickly melt away with that strong April sunshine. And then another fine day to come for many areas, just perhaps the Western Isles and parts of the Highlands seeing some patchy rain and drizzle at times. Northern Ireland should largely stay dry, but thicker cloud here through much of the day. And the sunshine also turning hazy for parts of North Wales, Northern England. Best of the blue skies holding on in the southeast. And again, temperatures similar, 11 to 14 for many. Over the next few days, we'll see bands of rain starting to move in. So Wednesday turning wetter and windier, particularly on Thursday, quite a cloudy day before the sunshine tries to return for Friday. Temperatures around average.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's
wink.
listening.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Donald Trump bunkers down in New York as he prepares to become the first former president to face criminal charges.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Tuesday, the 4th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Dalby and Ellie Costello.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Donald Trump is now in New York ahead of an historic court appearance today. Reports suggest he will face 34 felony charges, yet he'll plead not guilty.
Tributes are pouring in for the former Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who has died at the age of 91. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hailed him as a transformational Chancellor and an inspiration.
And a poll marking Keir Starmer's third anniversary as Labour leader today has revealed that almost half of the voters believe he has not set out a clear vision for the party or the country.
The man who murdered 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell has been jailed for life. Thomas Cashman refused to appear in the dock as he was sentenced to a minimum of 42 years in prison.
And the first stamps featuring the profile of King Charles go on sale today. In line with tradition, the monarch faces to the left, but unlike the Queen, he is not wearing a crown in the image.
And do keep on getting in touch the usual way via Twitter, GB News, or you can email us, gbnews@gbnews.uk. Let us know where you're watching and listening to us from and your reaction to any of the stories that we're talking about this morning. To our top story now, and former US President Donald Trump is now in New York as he prepares to become the first former US president to be arrested.
It's going to be a day of high drama. Mr. Trump is due to surrender at the Manhattan District Attorney's office later today before appearing in front of a judge for an arraignment where he will plead not guilty.
Well, our political editor Darren McCaffrey is in New York and has the latest.
Well, Donald Trump has been hunkered down in Trump Towers all of last night here in Manhattan with his family, with his legal advisors, ahead of what is to be an historic day here in the United States. The first time a former or current president has ever appeared in a court charged effectively with a crime. Now, later on, President Trump is going to travel a relatively short distance from Trump Tower down to Lower Manhattan, where he will first of all meet with the District Attorney of Manhattan, where he will be fingerprinted. We think, though it is unlikely that he is going to be handcuffed or indeed have his mugshot taken. He will then appear in court itself, where he'll be in front of a judge and have the charge sheet read out against him. Now, we think he's going to face at least one charge of business frauds, though some media reports in the United States say the charge sheet could be up to 30 separate charges. We're going to have to wait for that. It will only be revealed in court later on. President Trump is going to deny all of those charges, though his lawyer has repeatedly made that clear that he is up for the battle of trying to exonerate himself throughout this process. Now, we're not entirely sure whether this legal proceeding, the bit in court, which is going to be relatively short, we think around 50 minutes long, is going to be televised or not. There have been meetings today between essentially the judge and legal officials and the broadcasters here in the United States who do want it televised, though Donald Trump's team have made it clear they do not. They feel that it would add to a circus-like atmosphere. And then after that short appearance, President Trump is going to head straight to the airport, back on his plane and back to Florida, where later on tonight he's going to address his supporters down at Mar-a-Lago. And again, I'm sure he's going to reiterate the message we've heard time and time again, that he feels that this is a bit of a witch hunt, that he's been prosecuted, and that in the end this is part of a political process to deny him the ability to run in the 2024 presidential election. The other thing to look out for today is protests. We are expecting some Trump supporters to gather effectively here in New York again a little later on. We don't know how many. So far, yes, there's been a few protesters, either down in Florida or indeed here in New York, but not any great numbers, though that may well change later on today. And there's been a warning from the mayor of New York to those protesters to be on their best behaviour. So it is going to be a fascinating day, a day in which history will be made, and a day which also could make history in another way, in that it could set the template, the tone, and indeed change the course of not just President Trump's attempt to become the nominee for the next presidential election, but indeed his attempts to become that president in 2024.
OK, that's Darren McCaffrey there in New York. He'll be covering that story for us throughout the day. But now back to the studio. We're joined by Eve Pollard, former newspaper editor. So a day of high drama ahead. Is there going to be a prosecution or is it just a witch hunt?
Who knows? I mean, today is going to be Trump Day. Whatever else happens, he is going to make sure he's centre, sideways and on. And I've just come back from America. America is in a really sort of bad state. He's a very divisive figure, as has become Biden. People love him or hate him. And, of course, I was fascinated, because everybody's been fascinated, how does paying off a sometime lover become an indictable offence? Well, he said it was to help his... he had to sort out things in his campaign, and he paid him with campaign funds. And, of course, as you know, millions of dollars get swashed about in campaigns for the president in America. So they're picking up on a tiny point, but I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime, a president up for indictment in a court. I mean, an ex-president.
Yeah, I mean, it's history-making, isn't it? First US president in history to face criminal charges. But what also is incredible is he's probably one of the only people where facing criminal charges is actually making you more popular in the polls.
And choosing to go to court, because he could have done a lot of this online, but he wants to go to court. Apparently, one of the great discussions is, will the mugshot be released as part of his campaign? I mean, the campaign for president for America starts here, starts now. It's been going on quietly, but he's sort of fallen into the trap in a way, because all news for Trump is good news. You've got Biden taking headlines, going to China, going to all these other countries, Riyadh or whatever, and Trump is angry because it's not him.
Yeah, now, I think the mugshot won't be released, and neither will pictures of Trump in handcuffs. I think he would have liked both of those things to happen. I think the T-shirt of him, America's Most Wanted President, you can see, would have been a merchandise moment.
A mock-up of those two things will be on the air, available probably from tomorrow.
And Eve, not only has his popularity gone up, but his funds have gone up. He's raised apparently $7 million throughout this furore now.
Well, America's going through a bad time. The big cities are full of people sleeping on the streets. I love New York. I lived in New York. My friends in New York saying, don't come. We're not in a good way. You can smell drugs on the street. In San Francisco and in Los Angeles, people are sleeping, tents lining up on the streets. There is a real bad feeling, and of course with the guns, not a good idea.
No.
OK, well,
Stay
please
with us,
stick with us,
because you're going to be talking through some of the other top stories on the programme a little bit later on.
OK, now, today marks the third anniversary of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party. But how well has he done?
Well, polling by YouGov has found that almost a half of voters say he has failed to set out a clear vision. Well, let's speak now to Shadow Minister for Policing, Sarah Jones. Good morning to you, Sarah. Really good to have you with us on the programme. And I know you're going to be speaking to us shortly about your anti-social behaviour plan, and that is, of course, very important. But this poll we wanted to touch on first, which is, of course, due out at the same time as the third-year anniversary of Keir Starmer becoming leader of the Labour Party, and your leader as well. But it's not good reading, is it? Half of the respondents say that he lacks vision. He seems uninspiring. Does your leader inspire you?
He does. I mean, if anybody had said to me the day after the 2019 election that we would be where we are now, with a really good chance of persuading the public that we are worthy of voting for again, then I would have laughed, and I think everybody would have done. Where we've come in terms of the journey that Keir Starmer has led us as a party, in terms of tackling anti-Semitism, in terms of exposing the Conservatives for the 13 years of failure that we've seen, and now beginning to set out our mission. But you're right, we've got more to do. We have to make the case to the country that Britain can be better than this, that things don't have to break down all the time, that things can be fixed, that we can have a stronger economy, and that our future should be bright, and it's our job to do that. And that's why, you know, I'm working on policing. I'm talking about having more police in our neighbourhoods, because I think we can tackle crime and we can tackle antisocial behaviour, and it's not good enough that the government hasn't, but we've got to make that case.
One of the criticisms of Keir Starmer is he's had more positions than the Kama Sutra on things like Brexit, on hard borders, on the union flag, on trans issues. Is him flip-flopping deliberate? What I mean by that is him appearing to be all things to all man part of his strategy?
Look, I was one of the first MPs to come out publicly and support Keir Starmer when he stood for leader, because his values are absolutely clear. He loves his country and he wants our society to be better and to do better. A strong economy, a strong NHS, and people feeling safe. His record as the Director of Public Prosecutions, where he was locking up criminals time and time and time again, speaks for itself. Now, we've come a long way since he became leader. A lot has happened in that time. The economy tanked last year. We need to look at our priorities in a different way and what's affordable. We want to spend taxpayers' money properly. So we have to live in the climate that we find ourselves in. But his values are clear, and I think people are beginning to see that, yeah, he could be a Prime Minister, and actually he'd be a good Prime Minister because he knows what he believes, he's got values, he's got a plan, and it's for me and all the rest of his team to go out and talk to you and talk to the rest of the country about what those plans are.
OK, well, the government announced its antisocial behaviour action plan last week. Now, Labour and yourself, you are here to announce yours. You're pledging more bobbies on the beat. So tell us, how is this different to the government's plan? Because they've suggested something similar, increasing police presence in crime hotspots.
So the government's plan contains several policies that we'd announced several months previously, so they're catching up on this one. They've called antisocial behaviour low-level crime. They've not given it a second thought for the last 13 years. Labour would put it front and centre of what we do, and what's different about what Labour is saying is we will physically put more police in our neighbourhoods. 13,000 more police and PCSOs in our neighbourhoods. At the moment, there's 10,000 fewer than we had in 2015 on our streets. And it's important not just for the reassurance that we all get when we see police officers on our streets, but they can prevent crime, they can understand their communities, they can know what's happening, and they can stop crime from starting in the first place. So we want a guarantee that you'll have police in your neighbourhood. They'll be named police officers and PCSOs, so you'll know who they are, you can get in touch with them, and they will be there patrolling our streets. Our town centres as well is a real problem. If you look at the criminal damage stats, they are off the scale awful in terms of any kind of prosecution rates, and also the increasing number of crimes in our town centres. So we have to have our police there, but also more powers. We've suggested respect orders, which is a kind of modern antisocial behaviour order that will be tougher and stronger at tackling those repeat offenders.
OK, Sarah, 13,000 extra coppers, a very laudable aim. Everybody would like that. Can you tell us how much that's going to cost, please, and where's the money coming from?
So £370 million, and we're getting that from putting our procurement together. At the moment, all the 43 different police forces across the country, they all buy their own cars, they buy their own uniforms, they have their own IT systems, they have their own HR systems. If we pull that, we can save hundreds of millions of pounds. We've said 370 million. Police Foundation think it's much higher than that, but we're trying to be conservative because we want to be as cautious as we can, because taxpayers' money is precious. We want to spend it wisely.
Well, I did my own maths before you came on air, and your figure, I think, is a little bit low, but well done. Wasn't quite as chaotic as Diane Abbott's attempt to price up policing before. So you obviously were briefed on this interview beforehand. Well done to your staff on that matter. But this is a lot of money. A lot of money. Labour have had a historic reputation as being tax them high, hang them out to dry. Is that the route you're going down? Just more taxes to squeeze money dry out of the taxpayer to pay for your projects?
Absolutely not. Of course not. We want to be careful with people's money. You wouldn't believe the amount of money that has been wasted by this government in policing, whether it's on procurement or on those shared services. There's an IT system which is £5 billion overspent in the Home Office. I mean, that money could have bought you a lot of police officers. We want to be careful with people's money. We're being really clear how we're going to tax. We're going to have a fairer tax system. We've set out how we want to get rid of that non-dom status. We want to sort out VAT on private schools. We're setting out as we go along how we're going to raise the money and what we're going to do with it, because we want to be responsible with taxpayers' money.
Sarah, I just want to pick you up on when you said that this was a modern version of an ASBO, because they were actually done away with by the government here in England, in Wales and in Northern Ireland as well, because they say breach rates are high, and the number issued had been steadily declining since 2005. So why would you want to bring in a modern ASBO if it's seen already to have not been working?
Well, it's a better version, and it's something that fits the problems that we face today. So what we're facing today is repeat offenders. So when you get an injunction out against them, if they break that injunction, then you're criminalised at that point. So we want tough sanctions for those people that commit those offences. The government changed all the rules in 2015. They got rid of what went before. What they've introduced, things like the community trigger, nobody really knows what that is, that it's barely used. The other sanctions that they brought in have collapsed in terms of usage. There's a whole plethora of confusion about how to tackle antisocial behaviour because the government hasn't taken it seriously. So we want to shine a spotlight on this issue because it's really important. It's what affects people's everyday lives. I was in Hayward yesterday. A woman said to me, back in the day I would have reported the kids that are causing me all kinds of problems. Now I don't. We want to change that. We want people to be able to trust their local police, go to their police, see action, and let's reduce that antisocial behaviour that really disrupts lives.
Well, Sarah Jones, Shadow Minister for Policing, and thank you for joining us from a very sunny Westminster this morning. Have a good day.
Thank you. It's lovely.
She said it's lovely. It does look lovely. Let us know what you think of Sarah Jones' pledges there, more bobbies on the beat, a modern ASBO. Is that what you'd like to see in your communities? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, To The Point is coming up just after us at 9:30, and Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner are here to tell us all about it. So, first of all, reaction to Sarah Jones there and this new pledge, new ASBOs. What do you make of all that?
Oh, it just feels like we heard it all before, but well done.
I could feel Andrew beside me. He was sighing and he was going, shaking his head.
I know, they had ASBOs before, and then the Tories brought their version out last week, and now Labour have got their version. There's not a lot between them, really. No. But at least she did do the maths.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you remember Diane Abbott, who was Shadow Home Secretary. Oh, God, it was a car crash, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When she didn't have a clue. So we are talking about the 3rd anniversary of Keir Starmer as Labour leader. And not great, because that poll on the front page of the Times shows 47% of people think they know what he stands for. I'm surprised it's only 47%, frankly.
And Bev, what about the big story? Trump,
Yep.
all the drama, no doubt you'll be all over that one.
We're going to be talking about that as well with various people. Even somebody on the show today who doesn't believe he was even guilty of the crime of paying the money to Stormy Daniels. I've not heard anybody come out with that position. So that will be interesting. We're also going to be talking, what I'm looking forward to, a gentleman called Benjamin Slater who was kidnapped by the Taliban only 2 years ago. And he's going to be telling us his story about that and how he now works with hostage diplomacy and the fact that there's a government report out in which the government do not come out well in terms of how they handle those state hostage situations. So I'm looking forward to talking to him.
And we're going to tell you just how much pollution is going on in our rivers and seas. We're talking to that great campaigner, Fergal Sharkey, who I remember, of course, when he was in the Undertones, being my age.
He's become a real activist.
Brilliant. He's brilliant on the subject.
Platform into real activism.
Absolutely. He's great.
Superb. Well, it's a great show, as I said. I normally watch it in the gym.
How were you yesterday in the gym? Did it go well?
It went very well, thank you. Yeah,
Good.
I was inspired to keep going by being publicly shamed by you. But you should be in the gym, Martin, so I'll make sure I do it.
Do you grunt in the gym?
Of course.
Oh, don't.
That's what puts me off.
Don't.
Can't have that.
It's all that grunting by men.
Oh, I would have thought that would appeal to
Andrew,
you.
too early for that, but lots to look forward to on your show. It's going to be packed today.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
OK, well, stay with us. Enough of that grunting. Eve Pollard shares her thoughts on Rishi Sunak as he gets a significant rise in the polls.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't believe I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
And welcome back to Breakfast. It's 9:22. Sir Keir Starmer has said he will be ruthless in the pursuit of power. However, despite this bold statement, half the country believe the Labour leader is not setting out a clear vision.
Yes, so does he have what it takes to get into number 10, or could a rising Rishi Sunak stand in his way? Well, we're joined now by legendary newspaper editor Eve Pollard. Good morning to you, Eve. So, not good reading for Sir Keir Starmer on his 3rd anniversary as Labour
Well, the
leader.
poll says people don't know what he stands for. And I think what's interesting, it is a contrast between him and Rishi. Rishi's also been in a poll, and 7.4 thought he was great a month ago, and now that's leapt up to 48.7, I think it is, because he's doing things. He's actually getting on with things and saying this will be our policy. Keir Starmer has shown he's not Jeremy Corbyn. Full marks to that. But that's as far as we've gone. Going down the trendy thing about not saying what a woman was, which is what all the front bench was saying a few months, worries you because it was fashionable, it was trendy, it was very right on. And you think, is he going to do that when he's Prime Minister? Because I wouldn't like that. As a woman, I was offended that they wouldn't say what a woman was, who had a cervix, who didn't have a cervix. Let's not go on about it. But it just worried you that it was fashionable and they'd gone down. We now need to know, because we're now into also election land, really. I want to know what he's going to do. I want to know what he's going to do about police. I want to know what he's going to do about all sorts of things, from tax, which matters to people, to how he's going to... the net zero thing. Where are we going with that with him?
Is it a skill or is it a weakness to be able to shift position and shape shift as he does?
Well, is he shifting position because he's not sure? Or is he not telling us because he thinks we may not like it? Or he's trying to keep this as a secret and launch it just before the election? I think life isn't like that anymore. People want to know now. The whole thing about life, whether you like it or not, is speed, and that's what we need now. What does he really believe in? What is he going to do? How is it going to be different? And they keep castigating the Tories, and the Tories have made some boo-boos with 3 prime ministers in 20 minutes. But, you know, you have to say what you're going to do now. If he's going to be in charge of this country, where are we going?
What does he need to do then, just very briefly, in the next year or so to actually persuade people to say, I am the man for you?
What are the main tenets of what he believes in? What is he going to do about public sector workers who've all been on strike? So that's looked pretty bad for the government. But what is he going to do to change that? It's all very well, and I think partly it was a Labour push to say, let's heap a lot of problems on the government. What's he going to do about public sector workers, some of whom do deserve more money and some of them jolly well don't?
Yeah, I think a lot of people out there will be thinking, you know, with the real Keir Starmer, please stand up. I need to know what you stand for before I can vote for you, because at the moment it's just a bit wishy-washy.
And also, how is it going to affect me? And that's what people really want to know.
Yeah, OK. Eve Pollard.
Thank you very much. Oh, we're finishing each other's sentences, Martin.
Like a couple. We've been around each other too long.
Yeah, and we're back again tomorrow. Yes, from 6 a.m. we're going to be back with breakfast.
But up next is Bev and Andrew with To The Point.
Very good morning. I'm still looking through what we've got on the show. It's a great show today.
Lots to talk about. Big interview with that guy who was imprisoned by the Taliban.
Yeah,